Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Hello and welcome to TrekChatz, a Chatz a television podcast mission to boldly go where many have gone before. My name is Magellan and I'm here with my number one. It's Alan.
Can't tell if we're doing The Prisoner or Star Trek at this point.
I thought the same thing. I was like, that's what's coming to my mind when I say number one, is not
Number
Patrick
one.
Stewart, but Patrick McGowan, the greater of the two Patricks.
The two Patricks. There's top three Patricks. Patrick Stewart, Patrick McGowan, Patrick H. Willems, number 4, Patrick Star.
Yeah, I'm glad Patrick H. Willems made it to the top 3. I think he deserved a spot.
And top 3 shows that have somebody called number 1. Number 1, Star Trek TNG. Number 2, The Prisoner. Number 3, Kids Next Door.
Codename Kids Next Door. Let's go.
Let's go. Wow, we love
boy.
TV here. We really love it. You can't
We
tell.
sure do. So this episode has been cross-posted in 2 places. One of them is the Chatz a television podcast main feed, where if you have listened to us for a while, I would imagine you're listening. But we've also created a separate feed called TrekChatz, a Star Trek podcast. So you may have found us there. If you did, you're on a feed where every 3 months we will be watching a season of Star Trek and talking about it, because this for us is sort of our white whale of television coverage. We've been watching and covering on podcasts, TV shows for, 6 years at this point? And we've covered other sci-fi shows like Farscape and Babylon 5, and there's always conversations about, okay, but when Star Trek and which Star Trek, and we decided, we normally watch things 2 episodes a week, but we'll just kind of zoom through Star Trek in this way so that it's fun for us. So every 3 months we'll watch a season of Star Trek and talk about it. And if that's all you want, here you are on TrekChatz. But if you like us and you want to hear us cover other shows, you can join us over at our main feed, Chatz a television podcast. But so we're going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 1 right now. Alan, I'm curious. First of all, I think we can give folks our general background with Star Trek, and then maybe our feelings about TNG coming into the season, general thoughts about the season. Where do you land with those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big appeal for us discussing Star Trek and with folks listening is that we've never watched these episodes before, or at least not in the entirety, like the whole season. I've watched a good amount of Star Trek in my lifetime. My inroad was the 2009 J.J. Abrams film, which I famously have watched over 10 times because I had a Blu-ray at home and liked watching it just because it looks pretty. I never saw Into Darkness, and I've seen Star Trek Beyond. I used to record a podcast many years ago where I talked about Star Trek Beyond, and that movie's excellent. But in terms of the television series, I think it was actually 2017 or so that I tried watching TOS. And I basically did a greatest hits of that series. I watched, all the Mirror Universe episodes, all the Klingon ones, all of and the Trouble with Tribbles, of course. I've seen a lot of TOS, probably about half of it, if not more. And it's really good. I think it's one of those shows that holds up better than you'd expect based on the time period. And then in terms of TNG, I have tried multiple times to get into it. And this is something we're going to talk about. But season 1 of TNG has its ups and downs. And so I burned out on it a couple times. It has a specific batch in that first third of the season that's just real tough to get through if you're not tuned into what you're expecting, and you're not ready to commit to it. But I think this endeavor was a big chance for me to finally sit down and say all of it, beginning to end, TNG, put it in my eyes, and talk about it with my best friend. So that's generally where I'm at with Star Trek.
Definitely.
What about you?
I have sort of orbited around Star Trek as a franchise for a long time without having seen much of it. I decided my allegiance pretty early on between Star Trek and Star Wars. Since the prequels came out when we were kids, I was like, okay, this is my stuff right here. I'm a Star Wars guy. Star Trek, whatever. You think that's better? No way. This one's better. It's like, dumb console war stuff. Like, who cares? That actually isn't a thing we should fight about. But I had some stake in it, which I think delayed my entry into watching Star Trek. And then I was aware, I think, of the various series and characters and things like that because my stepdad was a big fan of Star Trek, and he watched all of the series and he would rewatch episodes here and there. He would also he passed away a little over a year ago, so this made me kind of emotional when it came up in the show. But if I was ever like home alone, or I was the oldest, and if it was me and my siblings at home, he would say, "You have the con." So it's, he would reference Star Trek. So it was kind of fun to be able to watch this and be like, oh yeah, I'm filling in this kind of missing thing. Because up until this point, the only Star Trek thing I'd really watched was Star Trek Nemesis, which is the movie at the end of TNG that is like universally considered the worst one, which is funny.
Tragic and hilarious.
Yeah. And then I saw the remake movie that they did in 2009 and thought it was okay. But other than that, we've piloted TNG. We did that in December of 2020. Is that right? And then we piloted. No,
TOS was 2019. TNG was 2020. Yeah. Was 2020, and then December 2021 we did DS9.
Yeah, so that's what we do over on our Patreon. We sometimes pilot shows to consider if we should watch them for our main feed or not. And I was really excited to watch season 1 of TNG, and I had a lot of fun, and I can't wait to talk about it with you.
Oh boy, yes indeed. Yeah, it's like I said, we're aware of TNG. We know that the things going into this that we know. Seasons 1 and 2 are considered kind of rough. Some people full on advocate for skipping them. If you don't know us, we are not advocates of skipping things in television shows. We are also big advocates for watching things in the order they were broadcast, as opposed to things like chronological viewing. I think that there's a lot of fun continuity errors in season 1 of TNG that you could fix if you like shuffled around the order of episodes, but we did not choose to do that. And Star Trek has become really accessible recently. I think that's going to be something fun about watching this along with folks, is like we are watching it for the first time. We both watched this on US Netflix. Frustratingly, though, as of April 1st, it's no longer going to be on US Netflix. And then we have to shift to Paramount Plus, which is where all of Star Trek is located currently. So that's how we're going to be watching it. And we're watching those versions of it. And the Netflix version, also just worth noting here, is, I believe, based on like a Blu-ray release of TNG. So in addition to like us, spoiler alert, enjoying just the basic content of this old show, I just enjoyed looking at it. I think that this transfer is gorgeous, and it felt very modern. The audio quality and the video quality are like so good that you barely notice. It's more in like the hair and makeup that you're like, ooh, yeah, that is the 80s, yes. But it's really timeless, I think. And I've also known Star Trek as like a show that people just have on. And so that was something too when we were considering like, and we'll talk a little bit more about this after we talk about the season, but like, how did we want to do this, right? Because I know people who say they put Star Trek like they talk about Frasier, or they talk about Friends, where they just leave it on while they cook or while they are doing something else. And usually on Chatz, on our main feed, we watch things to at least around 2 episodes a week. We've mixed up that format a bit, but we really dig in. We like to zoom in and chomp down on what we call the meat and potatoes of different TV shows. And so we're taking a different approach here with TNG, which is, like Magellan said, we are talking about the season as a whole, and we're going to be focusing on some specific episodes, but we're not doing an episode by episode breakdown. So if you're here for that, seek that elsewhere. I'm sure there are TNG podcasts doing that, but that's sort of our background with Star Trek and with TNG season 1. But let's get into it. Yes?
Yeah, let's do it.
Star Trek season 1. I wish these seasons had titles, because I think that I like it when seasons of things have titles.
Yeah,
exactly. As all frustratingly released TV pilots tend to be from a certain era. This show had what people call a 90-minute pilot, or a double-length episode called Encounter at Farpoint, which, like we said, we watched back in 2020. Magellan, you rewatched Encounter at Farpoint, right? Can we just talk about how your first step into Encounter at Farpoint, and also what it was like rewatching it before we zoom out on the whole season after this?
It wasn't good or fun, and I didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah. It's a frustrating episode. I totally get why people burn out on this show. But something that's going to come up a lot in this conversation, a lot of the critique of season 1 of TNG is not how we personally feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually think any of it's boring. I don't think it is lazy. I think it is the product of how it was created. So something else that's going to come up a lot is this show was created to be syndicated, like every Star Trek show. So it was made to go long. It was co-developed by Gene Roddenberry, the franchise's founder and sort of the godfather of Star Trek, for better and often for worse, from what I've been reading on Memory Alpha, the Star Trek Wiki, which is going to be a crucial resource as we talk about it. But yeah, overall, I think season 1 is really fun. I kind of want to talk about what do you think Star Trek is about right now? What is season 1 of TNG overall about?
Yeah, I think looking that question dead in the eye is where I start to waffle on my enjoyment of Star Trek, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
because it is really fun, and I enjoyed it as a show that I had on while I was playing Elden Ring or eating my dinner or whatever. And it was a nice thing to be a kind of part of the texture of my day, as opposed to something that I closely examined. And I enjoyed episodes where we're kind of just doing a silly little adventure, because that fit what I was hoping to get out of it. But what we're examining is a military crew who's going forth and exploring foreign planets and places, and espousing a particular worldview, a particular brand of utopianism that sort of thinks it's more self-aware than it is, I think.
right.
The notion of the Prime Directive as, hey, we don't meddle with indigenous populations. We don't do anything except show up and say hello and watch some stuff happen and then leave. I can understand the way in which that principle is conceived, but I don't think that the Prime Directive is non-invasive or non-imperialist. It's just different.
Yeah.
And I think TNG oftentimes, in season 1 especially, and I talk about this, and we recorded some voice recordings that we might bring up as the episode goes on, but the most frustrated I got with season 1 of TNG is when all of the Starfleet characters would be these perfectly rational people who are responding to just the irrationality of non-human characters. And I didn't think that was super interesting. And I liked it more when they were having internal conflicts or disagreeing with each other, or where they weren't quite sure what the right thing to do was. But in several episodes throughout the season, we show up at a place, a group of people are doing a thing that the episode is telling us is clearly wrong. What are you going to do about it? Okay, let's twist the rules a little bit so that we can make sure it doesn't happen. Okay, bye-bye. And I think that maintains an imperialist worldview, because it maintains this idea that we know what's right and wrong. There are places that are backward in the universe that we can sort of look down upon and feel a white man's burden towards or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I think on the one hand, TNG is in the more anodyne sense, it's about a family of people hanging out and learning to love each other and having adventures, and that's great. And then it's also about like it's about all of that stuff that I said.
Right.
But I don't know, where do you land on those things?
I sort of think of TNG season 1 as like being multiple different stories in a broad sense. I think that the first like third of the season is extremely, and this is the case according to background information, extremely leftover TOS episodes. One of the very second one, right after, depending on if you consider Encounter at Farpoint 1 or 2 episodes, The Naked Now, which follows that up, is literally like a recreation of an episode of TOS, the original series, and feels like it, and doesn't have defined characters, and doesn't like build on anything other than the comedy of like this illness that's on the ship. And so like the early part of TNG to me just felt like, here's a bunch of perfect people who figure things out because they're really smart. And
Right.
I was like, I wasn't falling in love with the characters. And I think that for me, as somebody who really strongly values character work in my TV shows, I think, in my stories, actually, I think the first like third of the season really put me off. And I had to enjoy it from more of an academic standpoint of like, okay, what do they envision the future as? Like, what's their priorities in Starfleet? And then I honestly think it was around Justice, which is an often discussed episode of the series, good and bad, where they introduce the Prime Directive, and you know the season starts to talk a little bit more about Starfleet and like what does it mean that we work for this governing body that has these rules about quote interfering with quote big quote underdeveloped races. Or less developed races, and like what does that mean, and how do we break it, and why do we break it? I know from just osmosis culturally that the Prime Directive is something that the TNG crew and beyond break multiple times. That's like the point of an idea like that, is that you break it. It's like a Chekhov's directive, so to speak. So I'm aware of that, and also there's a character named Chekhov in TOS. So there you go. Yeah, I'm aware that that's like a thing they're going to keep on coming back to. So seeing it seated in Justice, which is an iffy episode, was like kind of interesting. And then I would say it's around data lore that I realized that the show could tell stories about characters, and like do stuff with the holodeck that's not just funny, but also like says things about this version of the future, how it's quote unquote post scarcity and again quote unquote post racial and all this stuff. Like I just found all that stuff really interesting. I think where it drags though is even in this like second half of season 1, you get multiple episodes in a row that are just like, here is a society that has a really unique and weird rule, and we have to navigate that as Starfleet, and like how do we deal with that? Episodes like When the Bow Breaks, where it's like, oh, we can't have children. It's like, okay, that's something specific. I guess you're trying to say something there. But those ones are also interspersed with really charming and fulfilling character-centric episodes, like The Arsenal of Freedom, like Heart of Glory. And then I think the back end of the season is a really fascinating mess, just like the whole thing is, because it's more about like, okay, Starfleet might be bad, and you can practically see the show trying to break out of Roddenberry's goal. So this is something that's going to come up a lot, right? Gene Roddenberry had this idea for TNG that like this is a group of characters on the Enterprise who don't fight with each other, who don't disagree with each other, and who don't have character conflict. There are multiple interviews where Roddenberry was like, this is a rule, is the stories should be about the planet they're on, the problems with the rest of society, and the Star Trek crew comes on and fixes things. They really quickly realize, and you can tell by around like by the episode Symbiosis, that like that just doesn't make an interesting show for very long. And it can. I'm not here to say that like there's no value in a conflict-free type of series story like that, but it's so much more exciting and engaging when these characters get ruffled up a little bit and their past comes back to bite them, like in We'll Always Have Paris, and finally like bigger conflict. Like something really great that I do think is actually partly on the shoulders of people like Roddenberry, like writers like that, is there is implied conflict that just happened. It's one of my favorite like fictional concepts, is a war that just ended. They talk about like big wars that they had with various Klingons in the past, and with the Romulans, and the concept of the neutral zone's introduced very early. And then for the season to wrap up and be like, hey, the neutral zone's still a big deal, and like the Romulans are still around, is like the show basically saying, hey, conflict isn't over. We're not post-conflict and post-scarcity. War still exists in this 2300s or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like overall how I felt about this season. I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted so much more out of it, but what I did get was really surprisingly satisfying.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts about some of the things you just said. I think what bothers me about the like no interpersonal conflict or however it's expressed is what you were saying, that like that just doesn't, that idea doesn't persist for very long in a show where people are like watching it week to week. I think if you're just sort of doing a TV show that like, if you're just sort of doing a TV show that people are going to tune into randomly and you want to tell like a stock story every week, it almost feels like an older version of serial storytelling or television storytelling, where like you tell the story and then the episode's gone and you could just tell the same story over and over and over again. But that just wore thin pretty quickly. And the episodes where there was some continuity, I was like, whoa, hold on. There's like things that have consequences in this show. Okay, that's interesting. But I think the flip side of it that's kind of funny for me to think about, reflecting on what you're saying, is there are these episodes where, for example, people have haunted pasts or lovers that come back. And that was something that when we were watching Babylon 5, we like made fun of season 1 of Babylon 5 for doing that all the time. Because Babylon 5 in a lot of ways is like a correction for TNG being the way it is. Where in season 1 of Babylon 5, there's like tons of episodes of somebody's former lover is here to talk to them on the space station. So I do have an appreciation for the emphasis that TNG places on like, we are going places, exploring stuff, seeing new things. And I think where season 1 fails is when seeing new things feels not particularly new, because it's just sort of a new twist on the same exact plot over and over again. I think the other thing that I'm thinking about in terms of like, what is TNG about, that was sticking with me, and that was some of the most interesting character work, was the nice thing about TNG is you can tell the themes of like a war story without characters being at war or being in battles or things like that, because you have a group of people who are like far away from their home, they're duty bound, they are trying to deal with crisis situations, and you get to explore, what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to make hard choices? What does it mean to rise to the occasion? What does it mean to give of yourself for the sake of others? What does it mean to like develop camaraderie with other people? And where does that get complicated? I think that from the jump, Star Trek The Next Generation is engaging with those things in really interesting ways. And the main characters all have angles on that that are fascinating to watch. So for me, the like strongest thematic work in this season, at least, is those questions of like, we are a unit with a common mission, and what does it mean to be a person who is like united under a mission and has to make actions or take choices or things like that in that context.
Right. And when they're like religiously dedicated to the mission, even at the expense of their own characters, it can be kind of like distancing. And again, in like a maybe intentional way, where I'm just like, okay, everybody agrees this is not exciting to me. Like, we're just, and it's cool to watch, yeah, like teamwork happen. But I find so much more value out of like, okay, we made a team. We don't always get along, and we don't always agree with how we're told to lead. I think it was The Arsenal of Freedom is the episode where Geordi is like asked to lead the Enterprise. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, this is actually exactly what I wanted to see. Like, I'm not here to tell you that I want every episode of TNG to be about like furthering a bigger plot. I don't. The way I watched this was super conducive to enjoying it episode to episode, which was every night before, like, I wind down and do all my other stuff for the day. And then at about 11 o'clock, I put on TNG and I watch a 45-minute episode, and then I go to bed. My phone is off. I'm just watching a show. No one's texting me. I'm just fully engaged. And sometimes that meant like, okay, fully engaged. Sometimes that meant that I was like watching a dumb episode, and I was like, okay, well, that's dumb, but it's fine. There's another one tomorrow. Like, there being so much TNG means that I'm very okay with like occasionally my night was just spent watching a dumbass episode of the show. And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
I know this isn't in our outline, but I wanted to briefly like talk about each of the main cast and what we think about them so far.
Yep.
Because I think something that's going to be really fun is analyzing like how the cast members and their portrayals have changed. Because even in the season, I think characters went from like not at all filled in to extremely filled in, kind of mostly across the board. But we can just go down the main list of cast here. Let's talk about our boy Jean-Luc Picard, the Frenchman. Picard. I love hearing different people say it. I love some people put a little bit of twist on it.
Yeah, when people really put the French on it, I'm a big fan of that.
Yes.
Picard.
And then they're like Picard, and you're like, oh, that's not my boy. Picard at his worst is Bargain Bin Kirk. They like clearly wrote certain plots for Kirk. Occasionally his obsession with like being a cool guy and the way he smiles. I just love Patrick Stewart. I think he has like a charm to him. I always associated Picard with being a like stoic captain, and it's definitely not the case. I think he has a lot of passion where it matters, and he has a troubled past in an interesting way without it just being like, I've seen dead bodies or something like that, because, you know, he's been parts of wars, and like they do address that stuff in an episode or two. But I think Picard overall is just like a really affable but not silly captain. And, you know, Star Trek has developed this trend of making the captains like be played by actors who've worked in Shakespeare a lot. And at his best, I think Picard is like hitting those Shakespearean beats while also being very human, which is such a difficult task to pull off. And I think that Patrick Stewart, really crushes it in his best moments. Were you a fan of our boy here?
Yeah, I think Picard's awesome. And I think that sort of affect is not just a kind of audience facing, like I'm acting in a theatrical way, but is almost like a way that Picard is performing for the people around him, and like invoking a sense of confidence in him because he's so self-assured and theatrical. I think what I really liked about Picard as a character is seeing two qualities in him of leadership that I think are really important. The first is his like constant interest in listening to what the people around him have to say. There's so many scenes where you're on the bridge and everybody takes a turn making a suggestion to him or saying like, well, you know, this is like this, or I don't know about this. And it's just clear that he's created an environment for the people who report to him where it's like, hey, speak your mind. I'm not going to like be super defensive or whatever. I'm not going to just go off and do my idea because I want to do my idea. If you can convince me, I'm going to let you do it. And as soon as I have made a decision, I am going to commit to it and just say it and go for it. And that decisiveness, but with an openness to hear out the very best ideas, is a really fun thing to watch. And my favorite scenes are, we've got some guy on the view screen and we mute the microphone and Picard's like, okay, what do you guys think? What do we do about this guy? I love the scenes like that.
He's always accepting feedback, right? He's always like, okay, questions, comments. Before I say the thing to the guy, does anybody disagree with me? Yes, we're good. Okay, groovy. Let's get it.
Yeah. And there's something really fun also about like the curtness, the efficiency with which he communicates sometimes, where, you know, Data says something and he's like, speculation or fact. He's not even asking questions. He's just saying the minimal number of words to get a response, which is like a really, I think, well-written character. And then the other side of him that I love is in her farewell, Tasha Yar says that that Picard has the heart of an explorer and the soul of a poet, something like that.
Yeah, I believe that's the line.
It's he's just like a very kind and empathetic person. Whenever people on the crew are having trouble, he's like, hey, take the day off. It's okay. Everything will be all right. Oh, you got to leave the ship. Sorry to see you go. I'm a big fan of yours. So he like cares about his people, and that's really cool.
Yeah. Right. A series like this doesn't work without a captain that you can like. And I think that in the grand scheme of like sci-fi bosses or sci-fi captains, Picard is definitely up there. And it's no wonder that they went on to make a spin-off series just about him in the future, because Patrick Stewart just has a magnetic charm. It's hard to describe. He's worldly, which I adore. He's handsome. He hasn't really physically aged that much in the last 40 years. And he just has a presence, like, without being a particularly big dude. That's something I also like. Kirk was this like American, like, handsome guy. He had like that traditional, like, good looking body. And like Picard is just like a very average build dude. And I like that about him as well. Yeah. And as a captain, I want to see him more, and like, see some flaws. When we watched the pilot for DS9, we actually watched ahead a teensy bit. We saw the end of season 3 of TNG. So just a warning there that we know how TNG season 3 goes, but otherwise we're pretty much spoiler free, and we'd appreciate if people could keep it that way for us, and for anyone else listening for the first time or watching for the first time. But we know that Picard gets like his hair tousled a little bit, gets his life tousled a little bit, so to speak. He's bald. Anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about Jonathan Frakes as Commander William T. Riker. Beardless. He's beardless. Everyone always talks about when Riker gets the beard, the show gets good. When Riker gets the beard, the show gets good. I love the Riker beard. Memes about the Riker beard. Riker is still hot without the beard.
God, Riker's so hot. He's
really, still hot without the beard.
It's really upsetting.
It sucks because it's going to be hotter.
Here's my favorite thing about Riker. He's always grinning. He loves his job. He loves Picard. He's having the time of his life. He's always grinning. It's so charming. And he does some of the same Picard stuff where he's like, I'm decisive, I'm making these choices, but his flaws, I think, are a little more obvious to us now. And his like wants and conflicts over being in the role that he's in, I think, are a little more, they play as a little more genuine to me. Like seeing him talk to Minuet, the holodeck program, and him being sad that he like doesn't have a lady feels more real to me than Picard talking to like his French girlfriend from way back in the day. I don't know why that's the case, but it just does. And Riker is like my favorite character right now, I think.
Whoa.
I mean,
I'm sharing my screen for you, Magellan. If you'd like to see this photo I just found of Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes kissing at a Comic-Con recently.
Okie dokie.
On the lips. That's really great of them. And that's the testament to the power of these guys' relationship. Is that they work together for so long, because these are both like series regulars. There are cast members on TNG who I know like come and go, but you have Picard and Riker, and again, the show just wouldn't be what it is without these two pals.
Yeah, definitely.
I once again, I think that the beard does not make Riker. I think that Jonathan Frakes makes Riker. I love, again, like you said, that he's always smiling, but he still feels flawed. And one of the things that I really, really, really hope that they dig into more is his relationship with Deanna Troi, because even in Encounter at Farpoint, they have the whole Imzadi thing, which comes up again later, and it's like, okay, you guys know each other, and there is a romance brewing here. Like, can we talk about that?
Yeah, they barely touch on it in this season.
I wanted so much, and I've been critical on our other podcast about like, won't their relationships, but I just think that these can like be professional people who have a working relationship that can be romantic or just like really close friends. Imzadi, for those that don't know, is a word from Deanna Troi's culture that means, I forget what it actually translates to, but the idea being that like it's a person who's really close to you emotionally and physically, so like a guy that she likes basically. And
I think it's probably like a soulmate, right?
a soulmate, yeah, to be more specific. It's not just it's not a one-way thing. It's like we were destined for each other. But I want to see that fleshed out more. And I think, yeah, Riker is a great parallel to Picard's like occasionally Picard has to be stern and Riker gets to be like a little bit more goofy and wear funny outfits and stuff. Moving along, we have LeVar Burton as Lieutenant Geordi LaForge, the GOAT. Yeah. Love LeVar Burton. Came into the show knowing that I would love LeVar and Geordi and just his whole deal. They didn't give us a lot of Geordi, but when they did, ooh, baby, I devoured it. Oh, I wanted every second of this man.
Big time.
I think he's in the running for my favorite member of the main crew because I think there is so much empathy that they are attempting to do here. And Star Trek does a lot with like metaphors for race, metaphors for disability. I think that Geordi's like eyesight situation has interesting storytelling material. And I hope that they handle it well. It is the 80s and it is a show created by like multiple different people, so we never know how that's going to go. But within this season, I think that they handle Geordi's like his disability really well. And I just think he is LeVar Burton brings like such an interesting presence to that character because you get the sense that like he knows how to be a leader, but no one's giving him the opportunity. It's just like, well, okay, hand me the keys and I'll drive, but they never do. And then when they do, he does great. It's awesome, and I love seeing it.
Agreed.
Love Geordi. Denise Crosby as Lieutenant Tasha Yar. This one's a bummer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Talking about season 1 of TNG, you have to talk about Tasha Yar.
I don't understand why people don't like Tasha Yar, to be perfectly frank. I think she's interesting, and I think if you're someone who doesn't like Tasha Yar, I don't know what you're basing that in, but I have some guesses.
Well, let's attempt to understand the full perspective here. So Natasha Yar she was security chief. So, they're trying to do something progressive by being like, look, they have a woman who is a security chief. But
by the way, multiple episodes, several of the early season episodes, the people they meet are like, you let a woman do a thing?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Weird.
And
our
Starfleet's
backwards ass culture.
We're very accepting of women. We love women.
Well, and what's so screwed up about that is they get to say that, except the writers of the show don't know how to write women yet. At all. Like, at all. And so they constantly give her the short shrift. They write her the bare minimum of dialogue. And, it came from the words of Denise Crosby herself. Something she realized while filming season 1 of TNG. They had really terrible filming conditions. They were like not like the actors were not like treated as well as they expected to be, despite being on this like huge show on a big network. And she realized very quickly that they were never going to give her a plot that was interesting. She has a moment, I think, in Skin of Evil, the episode where she unfortunately dies, where she talks to Worf at the beginning. And there's this relationship that you're like, wait, where was this the whole time?
That's awesome. I want more of that. When she's talking to Worf about how she's going to compete in the martial arts competition. Yes. And then they don't give us that and they kill her instead. I was so upset. Come on.
We'll talk about Skin of Evil more, but from what I understand, again, from reading the wiki and stuff, Denise Crosby just had quotes about like realizing she was going to be saying yes, Captain, no, Captain for the next 6+ years of her life, and didn't expect the writers to ever figure out her character, and so she asked to leave the show. And by the third to last episode of the season, they said okay, and they kill her off in what many argue is a really anticlimactic way.
Yes,
and again, I don't think it's Denise Crosby at all. I don't think it's her fault at all. I think they are literally giving her absolutely jack to work with. And you can't expect people to fall in love with her when she barely gets to talk. So
yeah,
I get it. I am bummed that she's gone, but that's the situation that with season 1 is the Tasha Yar problem, so to speak. Moving along, we have Michael Dorn as Lieutenant Worf, our boy. Our dude. How can you not love Worf? I mean, Michael Dorn is so cool and fun, and whenever Worf gets to be like challenge his Klingon heritage and be like more than the sum of his race. I find it so interesting. I mean, I do think it's like a little questionable that they like one of their only like black actors on the show is like the angry race, and there's a lot of discourse there that we are not fully equipped here to discuss. But Michael Dorn brings so much to this character, and makes it feel really human, coincidentally.
I also like it's not just about him overcoming his Klingonness, but like incorporating his Klingonness into his identity as a Starfleet officer. Like the episode Heart of Glory, whatever it's called. That was like one of my favorite episodes of the season because it really moves towards a place where we're having episodes that are both about like internal conflict and also about kind of structural conflict or questions, because the rest of the crew is looking at Worf like, ooh, he's acting like a Klingon right now. And yeah, he is. And that's like who he is, and he doesn't have to lose who he is to be where he is. And I think that that's like a really powerful thing to see in him, and I hope we see more of that.
Oh yeah. I think Worf has huge potential. He sticks around as well for a while, as I understand it, and I really like Mike Dorn's performance here. I think it's just really engaging and fun. He does a lot with the character.
Yeah.
Moving on quickly, we have Gates McFadden as Dr. Beverly Crusher. I fell in love with Beverly Crusher this season.
She's great.
I did not expect it. I was just really impressed. I think this is another situation where a female actress on the show felt burnt out by the series and how she was treated and how other women were treated. So, to our understanding, Beverly Crusher is not in the second season of TNG.
Yeah, from what I understand, she was fired for like pushing against the sexism of the show, and then there was like a letter writing campaign, and Patrick Stewart and some other folks were like, get her back on the show. And so she's in season 3.
She's surprisingly good, and I'm glad to hear that she eventually comes back, because
yeah,
I always love, folks know me, I love the doctors on sci-fi shows, always, without a fail. And I think Crusher is like funny where she needs to be, but she's also like a good, like legitimately a good doctor, like uses her judgment well and prioritizes human life well. Like she does all the good doctor things. And she gets to cut loose a little bit and be funny, which I think is good. And also there's like something between her and Picard, which I also wanted to see way more of.
way more of.
Way so much more of.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's fun as well. She's got that great blue jacket. I wish she always had that. Like there's scenes where she doesn't have it and you're like, this feels wrong. Where's your big fluffy jacket?
It's a good jacket.
It looks cozy. We have Marina Sirtis as Counselor Deanna Troi.
Yeah.
She is a Betazoid human hybrid. And so she's half Betazoid, which means that she has empathy powers, which means that her purpose on the ship is primarily to suggest, hey, what if we listened to people? What if we just opened our ears a little bit?
I really like Deanna Troi as a character a lot.
I'm ready to. I just don't think like she's there yet.
I mean, I think a lot of what I don't like is the show putting Beverly Crusher and Deanna Troi as like these two caretaker characters who are women. It's like that's weird, and there's some weird like gender stuff going on there that I think is limiting. It's limiting for the show and for what they do with those characters. But there's something fundamentally fascinating to me about having someone on the bridge who's like, hey, you seem a little upset.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it? Or like, maybe this is how you should approach the situation. And just what she does for the plot as a result of that happening, and like the ideas that Deanna Troi represents and forwards, it makes me really interested in her. So
yeah, she's another great example too. I mean, hey, all the women are treated a little bit pretty poorly actually, by the production. Apparently, they like criticized her weight a lot, and they dressed her. Her outfit is so unfortunate. It's such a bummer, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know they changed it later, and I'm so excited for them to change it and like do things differently with her hair and whatnot. But like, she's kind of not. I don't want to say eye candy. I don't even think that's the term. I think that they just like baseline sexualize her more than a lot of the other characters, and it feels weird. And I know that it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah, well, they just go out of their way to put her in, like, everybody's wearing a uniform, you know? And then they're like, but we're going to put her in this outfit that, you know, maybe shows a little more chest or whatever. It's like, come on, just put her in a fucking jumpsuit like everybody else.
Yeah, she gets this, like, weird gray, like, pajama outfit that's super chesty, and it's just like, all right, guys, like, Star Trek does not need to be horny. It really doesn't. When it is, sometimes it can be funny, but not in this way. I'm not a fan of it like this.
Yeah.
So, but I think Marina Sirtis is good. I just want to see them do good things with Deanna. And also get her with Riker sooner than later. Please, thank you. Brent Spiner as Lieutenant Commander Data. Oh my God, guys. They done created my favorite Star Trek character.
Really?
Data's my current favorite, yes.
Okay.
I think, I don't know about Brent Spiner IRL personally that much, but I'm in love with Data as just a character that like bounces the ideas of Starfleet off of the characters and questions things constantly despite being an android. I think they do a lot by giving him humanity. I think they're suggesting things about his sentience also that I'm so fascinated by. Like there's a moment in one of the episodes where he talks to the computer and it like sasses him and he's like, oh, am I like, he like detects sass and like knows how to like throw down. And this, like, you know, they play around with it too, where he doesn't know how to tell jokes or doesn't know how to respond to jokes and stuff like that. That's just funny. But I just found myself so enamored with him, and I wanted to see him in every scene. When he's funny, when he's serious, it's all just like super engaging to me. Did you like Data? Did you find yourself liking Data?
I'm really charmed by Data. I think Brent Spiner's doing a good job with the role, and I think Data ends up being put in interesting situations. Just because he knows a lot of stuff. He can like survive under conditions that other people can't, and like he's super strong sometimes or whatever. I think the thing that I'm wanting to see them smooth out is Data to me feels like the most inconsistently characterized character, because different writers will change the extent to which he understands emotions or change the extent to which he's funny or serious. And like, he's charming enough that I don't care that much, but I also don't know that I don't think that I could sit and write dialogue for Data, because I don't really fully have a sense for like what the bounds are of who he is. Whereas for other characters, I feel like that's a lot more clear. So that's my thing with Data.
Data also is the source of like a fan interpretation that I really dislike, that I'm just going to mention because it always comes up when people talk about Data, which is that they read his androidness as a like an autism metaphor, and this idea of like a neuroatypical person like being on the spectrum and not knowing how like quote unquote people talk. Hate that. Do not know or care if the writers are going for that, because there is this like persistent thing in sci-fi fandoms of like, this character who is not human is a metaphor for something in our humanity. Like all Klingons are African Americans, which like Jesus, or like all androids are autistic, which like, oh my God, fundamentally misunderstands how humans really work. And seems like it's missing the point, because I don't think that that's actually what they're going for, but I have to mention it because it's in my head. But Data just as an android, as a like exploration of what their Starfleet's values are and like what they programmed him to do and why he stays on the ship, for example, even when he's like offered better jobs, is interesting and has so much potential to keep going from here. Yeah,
and I think also he and Worf, if I understand correctly, Data is the only android who is in Starfleet, and is Worf the only Klingon?
Yes.
So
because there's a part in Heart of Glory where they're like, when did they start accepting Klingons into Starfleet? And he's like, I'm the first one, and I'm also the only one.
Yeah. And I think that that fact offers a really promising narrative potential where, in a sense, the Enterprise is this really accepting place because it's like, look, we have an android, we've got a Klingon, but it's that place in the context of a future society that is not that accepting, and maybe the Enterprise isn't, or the people on it aren't that accepting either, and maybe they don't think of Data as human or whatever. And I think that's something that they'll explore that I'm curious to see developed.
Yeah, and I just confirmed Worf is the only pure-blood Klingon in Starfleet. So,
Gotcha.
There's like mixed race people. And then just lastly, Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher. Another one of those characters that the fandom told me I'm supposed to hate, and I simply do not.
I love Wesley Crusher. I think he's awesome.
He's a child. How old is Will Wheaton when this show is being made? How old how old will you estimate him before I look this up?
Well, I can see your screen, but
whoops. Don't look.
I haven't looked at his age. I would say he seems like 14 or something.
He's about, probably when they filmed it, he was 14 years old. Exactly.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know how to, first of all, I don't like know how to act, but currently, let me just reiterate that I don't currently know how to act.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know how to act at 14.
Yeah.
As a human or as a character actor. And
Yeah.
he's like on one of the biggest franchises. And I'm not just saying like be nice to him, he's a child. I also think with what he's given, he's doing okay. Where I understand that people are annoyed is when, especially this happens early in the season 1, they like try to give Wesley this like special boy-ness that I find off-putting.
Sure, that's fair.
Like they suggest that he's much, much smarter than the average kid, and he like has leadership ability and like technological prowess that people his age would never have. And some of that dips into like, is this just so the kid? And it's so kids watching the show have a substitute for themselves when they're watching with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't know. I think that he's fine with what he's given. He has entire like episodes around him, and he's pretty funny. He's on a weird show that's occasionally hilarious. So I don't think he particularly brings down the quality of the series at all.
Yeah, I just don't feel, oh, he's so annoying. Oh. And that's what I've always heard, is that Wesley's like really annoying, but I think he's interesting. I think there are plots that explore his interiority, and he like grows as a character. And honestly, there's more material here for his character than for some of the other characters who are higher in the billing order. Yeah. So I really liked Wesley.
I'm
Wesley. Not afraid to say it. I love Wesley.
Controversial. Can you do me a favor? Can you play my voice memo from covering episodes 1 to 11 of season 1?
Sure.
I think this will guide us through our next part of the discussion.
Hey, Chatz listeners. This is Alan. I'm recording this at 12:04 a.m. on February 22nd, 2022. Ooh, it's 2/22/22. I did it. Happy 2/22.
Nice. Tuesday.
I'm here to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 1. Part 1. I just watched The Big Goodbye, which is episode 11 of Season 1. And I figured I would pop in here to discuss my thoughts on the season so far, what I've enjoyed, what I haven't enjoyed, and just my little takes. So we can drop this in the podcast episode, which should be releasing, I believe, sometime in April. If we're recording it late in March, I don't know what the exact scheduling on that is.
All right, we get it.
Just yet. Okay. But hey, the Chatz fans have been asking us to watch TNG for so long.
Yes.
We loved the pilot. Well, did we love the pilot? I didn't actually like the pilot so much as we like the premise of it, of the show in general, and know that it's really good. And we've seen other episodes of it. When we did every Christmas, if you don't know, we watch a pilot of a Star Trek show and try to decide which one eventually will be worth committing to. And in a way, we're committing to TNG with the plan to long-term commit to DS9.
In a way.
Because that one seems like it's very much up our alley. So, going into season 1, which is what I'm going to be talking about here.
Okay.
I heard like nothing but mediocre to bad things, honestly. I've heard it's absolutely TNG's roughest season. I've heard 1 and 2 and even parts of 3 are pretty rough. And I've just heard that people don't like it in general. And that it's Trek at its sloppiest and at its most boring. And I definitely think that there have been episodes that were disappointing. I'll come right out the gate and say that. And I will say that there are episodes that just like straight up don't live up to their cool potential. It also has this notorious early hump. And I think once you get past that hump, you get into a really strong block of episodes that I just got through. And I still have so many more to come, I know. So Encounter at Farpoint, we discussed in our Pilot Chats episode for December 2020, I think that would have been. Because 2021 we would have done DS9. And Farpoint, it's an overlong episode. It's got a Q thing. It's fine. But it does
hear me talk about Code of Honor.
Give us our characters. Something I just think in general that TNG does really well is it balances its A and B plots.
The third one.
It keeps both it tries to keep both very interesting, and keeps your interest for 45 minutes. Whereas I think a lot of like modern dramas will like have an A plot and have B and C plots, but are not structured in this like very rigid traditional way of here is the A plot, here is the B plot. They do not interact until they do. Period. You know.
So in that clip, I talk about the way that this show does A and B plots, and I think it gets way better about it in the second half of season 1. But like it reminds me, and maybe this is a weird cultural touch point, but like The Simpsons is a show I watched a lot as a kid and still occasionally check in on. And The Simpsons will do this thing where if you've never seen it, first of all, what? Second of all, the episode will start. It'll start like full-heartedly being about one thing, and then it is just not about that thing by the end of the episode. Like the first 5 minutes are about something completely different.
Right.
And sometimes TNG will do stuff like that, where like the A plot is about like this thing happening on a planet, but the B plot is about leadership and like something that we found on the ship. And they split the difference there really, really well, but they also make them so distinct. Like they do not even try very often to thematically smush them together. And I think that just is a really fun, like I say in that thing there, it makes the 45 minutes go by so quickly because you're like fully juggling two like entirely developed plots instead of like, we're trying to tell one cohesive story. And I like that. I don't know why exactly, but I think it's interesting, the structure of it.
Yeah.
And then something else I mentioned in there is just like the early hump. And I think honestly, to start off here, before we dig into some episodes, if you can get past Code of Honor and get at least to the last outpost, you're in for a good time. You just have to get through that first batch, because it starts out really rough and then it gets decent and then it gets great. So, Michelle, is there anything else you want to bring up before we talk about how we're going to rank the episodes?
No, let's do it.
Okay. So for folks at home, we're going to create a tier list. For all episodes of TNG Season 1, we are, if anything, pandering to the type of content that people like to hear. Everyone loves a good tier list. And we're just going to go in order. We're going to talk about the episodes, give them each a super quick little like topic or discussion, and then we're going to put them in a ranking from S, A, B, C, D, F, and of course, Chatz original, bad but actually good.
Yeah.
Which is a distinct category that means that the episode is like objectively, quality-wise, as a production, not good, but objectively, truly, for sure, good to us. And he can't argue. It's indisputable. So,
yeah.
You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, Encounter at Farpoint, which is considered episodes 1 and 2 here. We got Space Jellyfish. We got the reappearance of Dr. McCoy. We have Q. That's it. That's all I feel about this one. Yeah. It's so boring.
It's just not that interesting. I think everything that's fun about it is meeting the characters in the show. And we've talked on our Patreon at length about how we felt about the episode, so I don't feel like rehashing it here. But like, I really didn't like Q the first time we watched it. I kind of liked Q this time because Q was like a moving shape on the screen that made things more interesting. And then by the time we got to the second Q episode, I was like, okay, yeah, I don't like Q. I'm glad that I know
coming
that.
Out the gate.
But Yeah, I don't think this is a great or interesting episode. I think 90-minute pilots are a blight on sci-fi television. And this is like C tier at best to me.
I would honestly argue for D tier.
Okay, sure.
I think I like the touch of McCoy coming back and saying the whole thing about like if you treat her like a lady, she'll come back to you or whatever. It's a corny. You treat her like a lady and she'll always bring you home, is what he says about the Enterprise to Data. Like I thought that was really sweet, and it's basically the old actor handing off the show and saying, "It's your turn now, guys. Figure it out. You're the next generation." Literally.
Right.
And yeah, I like the character stuff. I sort of like Q, but I really think you can't start with Q because we don't know.
Definitely not. We don't know anything about anything yet.
Yeah, Q exists to be like, hey, everything about your organization is stupid, and you guys have like ruined the world irrevocably. And you're like, what organization? What do you mean that everything's like you don't know yet? And
yeah,
so that's why this like stinks as a Q episode. And yeah, say what you will about John Delancey's performance. I think he's kind of charming, but he's not good here.
I think he's a great actor having the time of his life. And someone in our Discord said it's weird that that I dislike Q because it seems like the role I would want to play, which is extremely true. I'm sure it's a blast to be Q, and I also don't like his presence in the show as a narrative device, separate from like whether it's entertaining to watch him or not. My hot take is that the finale of season 1 is a better pilot to TNG than this is.
Oh, huge agree.
And I think it makes no sense that the finale is at the end of the season. I think you have a better watch experience if you watch that episode first and then watch the rest of season 1.
100%. And there's background info about like Encounter at Farpoint was made more boring because the original writer of it paced it too fast, and they padded it, which sucks. And
you can feel it. Yeah,
you can super feel. You can tell like the jellyfish thing. I don't think is very interesting. I don't like this version of the Enterprise crew. I don't think that they're like fully formed at all. And as a pilot, it doesn't sell me on the show. I'm sold on the promise of the future show getting good. But I think this straight up fails as a pilot, and I would be comfortable putting it in a D rank.
Cool. Sounds good.
The Naked Now, the infamous recycled TOS episode where everybody gets drunk virus. And what's it called? Tasha Yar has sex with Data.
Yeah, and he's fully functional.
Ugh. I still don't like it. I just think
it's so fun. I had a great time.
It's super funny. It's funny. I laugh at it. I think Tasha Yar's outfit here is illegal. The whole like blue silky getup and all that.
It's awful. It's so stupid.
It's very bad. I love though the beginning when they see the crew of the Tchaikovsky and they're like, a wild party, and it's like there's a lot of scenes in season 1 where they go to a ship that's like derelict and they're like, what could have happened here? But this one's like, did they get buck the fuck wild? Like, did they have a wild time?
Is everybody nude in here?
Yeah, and the infection is them getting like sexually aroused and drunk, and this is an episode where I understand I understand why somebody a Wesley Crusher hater would hate Wesley, because you're like, ugh, he's just so annoying, and like he puts up the barrier and like puts himself on the screen. I feel strange, but also good, like all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like, Data's hilarious here. Picard's hilarious here.
Yeah.
There's that guy who plays like Jenga with the control chips. Is like the engineering guy. Hysterical. I think we feel comfortable putting this in bad, but actually good.
Yeah, I really like the Picard and Dr. Crusher stuff in this episode. I think that is actually positive. I think that the Tasha Data stuff is like illegal and it's like not canonical in my mind.
Yeah.
It's just so strange that TNG is like, okay, cool. We got to introduce people to the show. So we'll start with like a space wizard that takes us totally out of the context in which this crew normally exists and yells at them for a while. And then we'll get everybody drunk so they don't act like their normal selves. What are their normal selves? I don't know. But they're not acting like them. Okay. Thanks.
The actors don't know either. So it feels super weird.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't even think... When you watch The Naked Now, just pretend that it's not canonical, and then it's
it's like a gag episode. Yeah. And it's recycled. It's recycled from the 60s, whatever. Like, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, we go from that to Code of Honor, which is a really troubling episode in which the writers had a decent idea, and then somebody came in and said, but what if instead of what you guys had, we made the foreign weird aliens who have like tribal culture all be played by black actors?
Yeah.
You accidentally did a racism, Star Trek. You accidentally made a wildly racist episode that I can't. That's also really boring. It is both racist and super duper dull. It's the longest 45 minutes of my life watching Code of Honor, and not just because of the racism, but also like the whole thing centers around like, you guys let Tasha Yar in your ship and have a position of power. We must make her fight to the death against my wife, and I want to take her as my God. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Man, this is a flat F tier episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was glad to realize that in watching this episode, I still wanted to watch more TNG. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm like willing to find the little flickers of the show that I think I like in this, in an episode that is like otherwise completely reprehensible to a comical degree. And also like not just the racism stuff, but the amount of times that Tasha Yar as a character is like, yeah, I do think that the guy who kidnapped me is super hot, but I just don't think it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Stop it. Why are you doing this?
And
it's
all of the cast hated this, and retroactively, all of them got to slam dunk it. Frakes and Brent Spiner both got to be like, yeah, worst episode, easily worst episode of the show, most racist. Like, they just, have slam dunked it forever. And I think that's fine. Like, you're allowed to not like all the work you do. And I'm glad that no one's like, no, but it has good qualities. Like, nobody's out here defending Code of Honor. It's just a stinker of an episode.
Yeah.
But if you can survive that, you can get to the last outpost, which is the introduction of the Ferengi.
Brent Spiner said it was the third episode, so it was fortuitous that we did our worst that early on, and it never got quite that bad again.
Yeah, I love that attitude.
Yeah.
Code of Honor, the Ferengi. The Ferengi, from what I understand, were supposed to be the villains of the series. I'm sorry, the last outpost. What did I say?
Code of Honor.
Excuse me. The last outpost. The Ferengi were supposed to be the villains of Star Trek The Next Generation. We found a new type of alien, and they are scary and weird and evil. Also pretty racist, depending on how you think about it.
Yeah. So I've found there's this article from the Washington Post that's called Science Fiction's Anti-Semitism Problem. And one of the things that it talks about is the Ferengi as a sort of like Jewish stereotype, or drawing on it. It doesn't feel like this is an intentional Jewish stereotype, and people who are associated with the show have like denied that that's the case. But you can't deny like, if we're being as charitable as possible, you can't deny that all of the actors are Jewish, and that all of the ways that we're coding the Ferengi are ways that Jewish characters in media are coded. Media and literature and all that stuff. They love money, and they're dishonest, and like all this stuff that shows up in fiction that characterizes Jewish people in that way, and that is blatantly anti-Semitic. Those are things that the Ferengi are. So even if you didn't mean to do an anti-Semitism, you did it. It's here, and it sucks.
I will say this. I don't think the quality of the episode is that bad. I think this is still at the point in the series where they didn't like know how to pace the episode super well. Like the A plot and B plot just feel like shuffled together, kind of. But I think the people playing the Ferengi are decent, and I know for a fact that Star Trek as a franchise goes on to really reclaim Ferengi identity, especially in DS9. So they've like retroactively like fixed the ideas in this episode, but I think this is either I'm comfortable giving this a C tier. unless you feel like it should be lower.
I honestly don't remember it super well. So I'm fine with that. Like, I'm uninterested in the Ferengi, but I thought the episode was fine.
Yeah.
I will say that actors who have played the Ferengi have said, like, we don't think it's a Jewish stereotype either. Or I think this was credited to Armin Shimmerman, who I think is the
Goes
guy who
on to
plays
play Quark in DS9.
Quark in
yes.
DS9. I think it was him who talked about how in all sorts of different places around the world, he's been asked in one place, like, oh, are the Ferengi meant to represent Jewish people? Oh, are they meant to represent, the Irish? Or are they meant to represent, like, people just sort of pick, like, a group of people who is discriminated against in XYZ way. Which is his, I guess, way of saying, like, the Ferengi just represent the way that we think about outsiders or whatever. I don't know. I don't think that's salvaging that, but I wanted to add that nuance because I don't want to speak for the folks who've played Ferengi characters for a long time and have like a perspective on it.
Yeah, and I fully believe even like the later Ferengi episode is better than this. So like they start to get it. And you can actually really tell when you watch The Last Outpost that like these guys are being set up as scary as hell right here. Like you should be freaking out at these like big-eared, long, sharp teeth people, and like they are intense and they don't listen and all this stuff. Like it's a little like unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
But the more that they lean into the Ferengi as like just another developed race that like, and I'm using their terms here, like work the way that we do. They just have their own different priorities than us, and that's okay. I think that's where the Ferengi work for me. And also like they're kind of funny. Like I want funny Ferengi more than I want like you should be afraid of the Ferengi. And that's where I land on The Last Outpost and why it doesn't get any higher than a C for me.
Yeah.
Because it's got good ideas, but it's not particularly amazing. Then we have Where No One Has Gone Before. Do you need a recap of this one? Because I believe this is the one with not the giant. This is the one where the guy comes on the ship and he's like, "I'm gonna."
Yeah, I can make it go
engine.
so fast and so far away. Kaczynski. I like this one.
Yeah,
I enjoyed this episode. I like the guy playing Kaczynski who thought that he was a smart guy, but it was just his like alien friend who was doing all the work.
Yeah,
and he's actually a huge loser. And I thought the Wesley stuff, even though the aliens like this guy's like the Mozart of space engines, I thought that it was kind of cool to see Wesley be the only person who said, hey, maybe we should pay attention to people and listen to them and try to be nice to them. Maybe that'll help. And I also thought there was cool visual stuff with time and space and thought blending into one another, and Picard seeing his mom and stuff like that. So
yeah, Picard seeing his mom was a highlight of this episode, definitely.
I was a fan of Where No One Has Gone Before.
Me too. You think it's a B tier or higher?
I think it's at least a B.
Okay. I like the Traveler too. I like the whole thing where he like dies and then has to come back because he like is working on the technology or whatever. And I thought all the stuff with the Traveler was really cool. Then we have Lonely Among Us, episode 6 or 7, depending on it.
Now, is this where Among Us the name came from?
I think I don't think the concept of Among Us originated here, but
this is like an Among Us plot, right? Where it's like
is.
Possessing people or whatever.
Yeah. Well, Transporting Delegates, an alien life form wreaks havoc on the Enterprise computer and takes over the minds of the crew. Right. It makes people betray each other and all that. Honestly, I don't even remember this one super, super well.
Yeah, it's not super memorable. I think it's like a D tier episode.
Mm-hmm. I'm just like, it takes above an F.
Data has the Sherlock Holmes pipe. So stupid.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think they did too early. Like, establish Data as a weird nerd, like after we go to the holodeck, not before.
Yeah, it's also the first example of this show being like sentimental and nostalgic for things that make it feel really dated. Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for them to be nostalgic for like the 50s in 2364 or whatever. Yeah, I think it's a D.
Yeah.
Justice, the controversial Prime Directive episode, where they go to a planet that has a rule where if you go into the Forbidden Zone and do anything wrong and you break any rule, then you are sentenced to death. And Wesley Crusher, like the dumb child he is, he like steps on some grass he's not supposed to, and they're like, well, we got to kill him. That's the only way this is fair. And Picard and company have to be like, well, it's not fair, but we can't tell them that. That's not fair. So I love the Prime Directive. I think the Prime Directive is like the most interesting like narrative stuff in all of TNG, TBH. But this is a goofy episode. It's pretty goofy. Everyone's hot and white and like this is horny. This is like we're walking around and they're like, we are friends with each other by having sex, and we like kiss each other to say hi, and like Worf and Tasha are like, oh my god, I'm gonna have so much fun here, and it's like this is dumb.
Yeah, it's pretty silly. How do you feel about the Prime Direct? Like, if you were on the ship having to make these decisions, would you abide by the Prime Directive, or would you think that it's a stupid idea and not do that?
If I were in Star Trek, I simply wouldn't join Starfleet. I know that's a boring answer. If I was on the ship, though, I would constantly be pushing against the Prime Directive because, well, like, let's dig into this a teensy bit here. If you're to say, like, you can't interfere with other races, then I would never go anywhere, because everything I'm doing is a little bit imperialist. I'm going there and telling them, I'm going to fix your problem, or I'm going to stop the bad guys who are harassing you. Like, they're always breaking the Prime Directive. It's just that they decide when it's the Prime Directive.
Right. Their mere presence is like a violation of the Prime Directive to a certain extent.
Yes, exactly. So I think the Enterprise is like an inherent, like their mission to go where no man has gone before is like fundamentally imperialist and BS, because everywhere they go has been gone to before. They don't go anywhere for the first time. So it's so fraught that the Prime Directive exists, and they're like, we can't mess with these people because they're not developed, and that would be unfair to like disturb the development of a civilization. And it's like, that's literally what you do. That's what your mission is on a basic level. What do you mean there's a rule about this? Like, no,
you should just not go there then.
Yeah, make your own thing in your own place. Talk about post scarcity, my ass. Why are you going new places if you're post scarcity? Get out of here. I'm anti Prime Directive, but I love it.
The other thing that ends up happening, because we've sort of removed all the problems on Earth and we're going and exploring, is that the show really upholds exploration and growth as like of self-evident goods. Like, it's just a good thing that humanity wants to progress and develop and grow and expand. And I think that that's kind of fucked to say that is like self-evident good. And I think that it's that ideology that has sort of permitted evil to be inflicted upon people for hundreds of years under capitalism and imperialism and all sorts of things.
I'm glad we're in agreement on this, because it's a thing that always like gnaws at me that not enough people talk about when they watch TNG. Is like, guys, do you know they're bad, right? Like, the show knows they're bad. It's just that the viewer is not paying enough attention. I don't even know. But there's a moment in the neutral zone, the last episode of the season, where one of the people from Earth goes up to Picard and he's like, what do you guys do? Like, what's your struggle? And it's like, well, we go places and we make things. And it's like, yeah, but one of those things is really bad, dude. Like, what do you mean we go places? What do you mean we travel and we explore? Like, that's who's being sacrificed when you do things like that?
Yeah, right.
And the show is just starting to scratch the surface of that question with Justice. But I don't think it really digs into it too much, so that's why I landed kind of in the C territory.
I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Really cool idea, but not really handled, period.
Yeah, because it's also just such a straw man. That's my other thing with the Prime Directive is it's rarely is it presented as like, we don't know if the thing that this alien race does is bad or not. It's always presented as, we know that what they're doing is wrong, but we are debating whether or not we can interfere with it. And I think that like simplifies the argument to a point where it's not interesting to me anymore, as opposed to we have a fishy feeling about this. We could interfere. We're not sure what impact that would have. And that I think is more interesting to me personally. Because this is like, this wouldn't exist. A society where every infraction is punishable by death, and so everybody lives in like a sex-filled utopia. No. Like what can I apply that to in life or think about related to that? So
it's like someone who watched The Twilight Zone but didn't get it, and they were like, yeah, it's perfect, except which, like, no, that's not how this works. Actually, also everyone's white, and it's really weird and off-putting on the planet. The battle, the second Ferengi episode, is up next. The Ferengi use a stupid red orb to make Picard think that he's on the ship that he was on when he blew up their ship back in the day during the war, and he hallucinates and almost stays there as it goes down, and they try to blow it up, and then the crew of the Enterprise save him. I like Picard not being the hero here. I think that's really fun. I do think now the Ferengi are just like the revenge mean people, which I still don't love. But better than their first portrayal. A little bit more nuanced. There are just a couple episodes of season 1 where it's like the bad guys are just really bitter, and I feel like I could just tell them like, hey, could you chill? And they would not do what they're doing. They like leap way too far forward into revenge and anger that I'm like, this is not believable anymore.
I think this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is. I'm curious to see stories reckon with PTSD and guilt, and I think that this episode doesn't really do that because all of Picard's guilt is like induced by the Ferengi, and he's sort of made to doubt reality because they're falsifying captain's logs, but we know so early that they're falsified, and like, no, Picard didn't do a bad thing. He's fine. This is all the episode's like afraid to dirty Picard up in a way where it's like, well, just do this plot later then when you're ready to throw some mud on this guy.
Yeah, it's a little bit early to try to muck up Picard because, like you said, they have to make him good at the end.
Yeah.
And I wish they would reckon more with his past, but not a disappointing episode because I didn't expect the Ferengi one to be particularly good.
I think it's C.
Yeah, I think so too. That brings us to Hyde and Q, which is the second Q episode this season. Overall things that happen in this one. He tests Commander Riker by giving him the power of the Q, and it becomes a Riker episode for a little bit there.
I have a take.
Okay, hit me with it.
I think this is bad, but it's actually good.
Oh. Sorry, I'm scrolling through the wiki and I just saw the shot of Wesley getting stabbed.
Impaled. I think this episode is bad. I don't like it. I don't like Q. I love the guy playing Q. I think he's doing a fine, fun job. I don't like Q episodes. I think it's super corny the way that they handle Riker has the power, and it like doesn't feel like Riker at all. It's so strange. And so you have to turn your brain off and be like, this is a non-canonical episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. And when you do that, you can enjoy like square-jawed adult Wesley not looking like Will Wheaton looks at all.
Yeah, not even 1%.
You can enjoy like Wesley getting impaled. You can enjoy we're on a weird planet shooting these guys. Q's got the outfits on. The directing is like kind of weirdly bad.
Big time.
Yeah, everything's so on the nose. Every character in the Riker plot is saying what's happening. Like Riker's like, I feel more power and I could use it to do something. And other characters are like, couldn't you use that new power to do something? So
I just found a really funny quote. This episode was directed by Cliff Bowl, who, according to Will Wheaton, was one of many directors who treated him very condescendingly on the set. He said, and I quote, "Most of them favored grabbing me by the elbow and moving me around the set rather than, giving me direction like I was a person or a professional or anything like that.
That
The worst
sucks.
offender was this guy, Cliff Bull," which kind of tracks when they're like, what does Wesley want? Well, doesn't he wants to be old. Like, we're going to make him older and like see if Dr. Crusher is like okay with that. Like kind of writing Q as like, here's the thing you guys want, isn't it? And the funniest example of that to me, and why I agree that this is so bad it's good, is they give Worf a girlfriend.
Forgot about that.
Give Worf an effing girlfriend, and she's like, "I'm gonna kill you," and he's like, "This is sex to me, but I don't have time for this. Like, I can't do fighting sex right now. I have to go be a Starfleet boy."
I think there's literally a line where he's like, "Yes, this is sex," or something.
Yeah.
The line is, "This is sex, but I have no place for it in my life now."
Literally all of my ace friends feeling called out right here.
That's a line that Worf says in this episode. It's so
It's
dumb,
embarrassing.
and
It's
I
embarrassing.
would rewatch it for the giggles.
Yeah, me too. That's a bad but actually good for sure.
Mhm.
That brings us to Haven, which is one of the episodes that I had watched on my own time because it's the introduction of Loxana Troy, Deanna's mother, played by Majel Barrett.
She comes back.
I think I imagine she does. I have to imagine she does. You don't get Gene Roddenberry's literal wife and not bring her back.
Oh,
Yeah, she was at least Gene Roddenberry's wife.
she's pretty
yeah.
funny. I like this character.
Yeah, I saw another take that was like all the episodes with Loxana are like the most annoying episodes, and I'm like, what do you guys want out of Star Trek? She's so interesting, and she's a negging mother who's really unfair to her daughter, and like super judgmental, and like flirts judiciously with all of the characters. And she's got this like servant guy who's played by Chatz alum Carol Stroiken, who's the giant in Twin Peaks, which we covered.
Yeah.
And seeing him do his whole thing and is really fun. And then when he talks at the end, it's like a Chekhov's like silent character thing. Like, he's gonna talk once at the end,
Mhm.
and he does. But I think overall, like this whole plot about Troy is like being arranged to marry this guy Wyatt, but he doesn't want to marry her because he keeps having this dream about a blonde woman. And what it turns out is the blonde woman is beaming memories into his head because her people are dying, and he's the only medical person who's like skilled enough to do it. And so he says, instead of marrying you, Deanna Troy, I'm gonna go live with these people and probably like contract a virus and die, but it's gonna be worth my life's effort. It's like kind of touching and interesting, but
It's touching, but also, are we supposed to be happy? Like, these people clearly are manipulating him.
also, again, if we're talking about the Prime Directive, like we're gonna let a guy from our ship, or like not from our ship, that like became to our ship, then like go here. Like we allowed that to happen. We allowed us to affect another society. Like,
Well, he sort of like slipped through without
he
them
leaves.
knowing. Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't it their responsibility to prevent that?
Yeah, but once you haven't prevented it, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I thought that all the reveals of that were good. I don't think the guy playing Wyatt is particularly charismatic. I don't believe that him and Troy would ever have gone together.
Yeah, they don't have any chemistry.
It's a common thing in shows that are going to go along is they try to get someone married in the early seasons, and you're like, they're not going to do this. They don't. This isn't how it works.
Right.
Where do you rate this one?
I feel like D's a little too mean, but
I think
don't
it's
know.
C for Loxana.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And for the like silver face in the box.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's true. I forgot that.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff. Carol Stroiken's in there. Put it in C. That sounds
Yeah.
right.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
Oh God, the big goodbye. At this point, I'm fully dialed in. I'm like, I love TNG. This episode's excellent. This is the first holodeck episode, which is a concept that they'll bring back multiple times. For those who don't know, the holodeck is a space on the ship where you can make any reality exist, with sensations and everything. It's fully a VR space. And it's, in this case, Picard blows off steam by living out the life of Detective Dixon Hill, a private investigator in the 20th century. And he tries to solve a murder, but also is this the one where they get trapped in there?
Yes, they get trapped in there. Yeah. And
Is
it's
the
like if you
aliens that
die
put a
in the
virus on the ship.
holodeck, you die in real life kind of thing.
Of course.
Three thoughts on this episode, I think.
Okay.
The first is it's a ton of fun. See Picard to do this, to see Dr. Crusher do this. People are having a good time playing dress 'em ups. And I really enjoy watching characters go along with the fiction, but then kind of like poke the holodeck and be like, wow, what a good program this is. And the holodeck's like, huh? What are you, a program? I think
This
that
is
like
real life.
that interaction that they have with it is fun. I get why they do this, but in this one and in the holodeck one where Riker's having his holodeck thing, there's always like this rush to create a problem or a crisis to like give the episode a plot. And I just be in the holodeck the whole time. That's cool. You don't need to like have this thing where we can't get, oh my God, we can't get out. Oh, now we might actually die. Just do a story where Picard and Beverly are like hanging out in the holodeck and maybe they like get a little too close to kissing in there, and that's fine. That's an episode, not a problem. So that's something that was a little annoying to me. And then the mobster guy was great.
And him getting out of it and being like, I can leave. Oh, I'm on a sci-fi ship now. And then he gets deleted is hilarious and really well done.
Yeah, pretty good.
I think this episode stands out because especially like everyone committing to it, like Data doing the like talking like an old-fashioned gangster, Crusher going in it just to try on cool outfits, and just she's so relatable here where she's just like, I wear a fun hat and I like sit in the police station and wait for Picard to get out, and he's like, ooh, I'm being interrogated. Like they're having so much fun. But something that you said there about like the show like has to believe in its own technology really is like starkly shown here in The Big Goodbye, which is that in reality what's happening is they're filming on a set that looks like the 1950s, but you the viewer fill in the blanks of like, this is a virtual space, this is all fake, none of this is real. You're making that up, but it's not fake, right? Like in the production, I guess it's fake in a different way, but they do this a lot in TNG, especially in this, from what we've seen, where they take something that's so on the screen insignificant or normal, but the way they describe it, the way they write it, the way characters treat it is so believable. There's that episode, I think it's the soil one, where it's just like they have a light inside of an orb, and they're like, that's an entire society that's multiplying at an exponential rate. And you believe it because that's the power of like good TV writing. It's just like, if people commit to it enough, I'll believe anything you tell me. So that's something I like a lot about The Big Goodbye and the holodeck episodes in general, is like they make you believe that this is a place that they're going to, or that it's on the ship rather.
Definitely.
I think this is B or A tier.
I would say B tier.
Okay. Data lore. The introduction of Lore, Data's brother, the only other that we know of, the only other android of his type made by Dr. Sung. Lore has different qualities than Data. He learns differently, and he learns a little bit faster. So at first, Data is really jealous, but it turns out that Lore is also an android supremacist and wants everybody else to like go away, and he's a bad guy, and they have to trick Lore with the power of Wesley. I like Lore as a concept. Another one of those things that I'm like, they're gonna do this better later, probably, if Lore comes back. But this episode's what'd you think?
I think this works entirely on the back of Brent Spiner just having a ball with it, and it's kind of infectious. And if you think too hard about the plot, it's a little silly. I think it opens some interesting questions about who's more human and what does it mean to be more human, because Lore would consider himself more human, and Lore is more nefarious, manipulative, socially adept than Data, but also more selfish and cruel. And so the question is, what does it mean for an android to have more humanity, and is that a good or a bad thing. That's something I'm curious to see examined more. I think the episode itself is a little messy, but it's fun to see like an evil Data. I can't help but think that that's a blast.
I think the thing that puts this up to a B tier for me is the scene where they figure out that it's lore because he doesn't use he uses contractions.
Yeah.
I was super duper into that. Like, Data has a language a way that he speaks that we never thought about. Like, I know he speaks a little bit different than everyone else, but that's there is specifically the rule of like he expands every contraction into the full word, and lore can just bypass that. Is like, oh my god, I've like, speaking of filling in the blanks, Brent Spiner is A, just wearing silver makeup, and we believe that he's an android, and B, in this case, is playing himself in a robe. And I'm like, that's a different character. That's lore. That's not Data.
Right.
Like doing a lot with a little. I fully believed that. I think this is a high B, honestly.
I agree.
Easy enough. We're getting to some better ones here. Angel 1. Get this. What if there was a planet that was entirely matriarchal and the men were subservient?
It's the same. It's like the same thing as Justice.
Yeah.
Is my thing. Like, this is where the season starts to rehash season 1 of TNG. Did you already run out of ways to do a plot? Because it's the same thing of, okay, there's this society. It's like, seems cool. This image you have on the screen right now is awesome. It's just shirtless.
This episode has such a
Picard
funny.
in bed.
The B plot in this episode is amazing. There's an illness on the ship. We
where
joke on
Picard's
Chatz
really
a lot.
sick, yeah.
Yeah, we joke a lot on the podcast about virus on the ship or bugs on the ship more specifically. And in this one, it's literally relegated to like it's a B plot, but it feels even less important than a B plot. It just gives the episode tension because Picard's like, I'm so sick and I'm gonna die. We need you back here. And the people on Angel 1 are like, if you guys leave, we're gonna kill these guys. And so there's like a fun tension to it. But I agree exactly with what you said. It's a rehash idea.
Yeah.
It's doing the reverse sexism thing of like, what if the men had to be in skimpy outfits? I am a mark for Jonathan Frakes wearing the like fucking outfit.
Yeah, it's working for me, and I do like the angle of, yeah, we're gonna tell these stories about kind of irrational alien societies who also want Riker to be their boyfriend and point at him and say, you come to bed with me now. You are my boyfriend.
It's just not a good characterization of Riker. I get it. Riker's horny. That's fine. But for him to just be like, all right, screw the mission. I'm going to go like sleep around with the leader of this society is like not a good Riker move, honestly. Or it's like it mucks him up, you know? Yeah,
but don't we want him to be mucked up? Like, I think it's consistent with his character.
It's better. I guess you're right. I think it's inconsistent with how they've been writing people so far, where everybody on the ship is perfect, and this is the first time that you're like, oh, Riker like deliberately like botches the mission in a way, or makes things more difficult by ignoring his team and sleeping with this person.
But also doing that is what eventually makes it possible for them to get the outcome that they want.
But did he plan for that?
No, I'm not saying he planned for it, but I'm saying that it was his connection with the leader of this society that caused her to reconsider her decision.
Yeah.
And like listen to what they had to say. So I think this episode actually does a good job of introducing Riker's like flaw, which is that he's a bit of a womanizer, a bit of a romantic who's like easily manipulated through that part of himself. He like longs for companionship or connection, but also refuses it to himself because it's like, oh, well, that's not for me. I have a duty as a Starfleet guy. And I think this episode shows that for him, that's both a liability and an asset, depending on the context and depending on the way that events unfold.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely liked this one in the moment and thought like, okay, this is kind of funny and weird. Like, there's a lady planet. It's not particularly nuanced. It's not the smartest episode. But
Yeah, I don't think it's like super interesting, but it's fine.
where do you rate it?
I think I liked the ones that we have in B more than this one. So it's either a low B,
high C,
or it's a high C. Yeah.
I think it's a high C. Mostly because I think
that's
that the plot of like the men being on the planet and being like we're not leaving is like almost interesting but doesn't get the time in the episode to be interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
That's where I am on that. Okay. This is the binary episode. I'm not going to try. Actually, yeah, here we go.
11001001.
The binarians. Can we just do this real quick, Magellan?
Okay.
I'm going to write out a sentence. I'm going to capitalize the parts that I want you to say.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Welcome
to
the
best
podcast
we
have
done
about
Star
Trek. We're the binarians here, guys.
Yeah.
I've been excited to do that joke with Magellan for over a month, so I had to bring it home. The binarians are really goofy.
This is such a like computers were invented yesterday. You ever heard of binary? I've been watching a lot of or not a lot, not as much as people would like me to, but I've been watching the X-Files for our Patreon, and every X-Files episode is we read 2 newspaper articles about a thing that's around, and we made it into an episode. And that's what the binarians felt like to me, is somebody heard of binary and thought, okay, yeah, that sounds right. That's what an advanced computer civilization would be like. They would turn into this, I guess. So that's the stupidest part of, I think, what is otherwise honestly a really good episode that I liked a lot.
How did you feel about the New Orleans Jazz Bar?
I loved it. I thought it was awesome. I'm here for this show. It's silly and it's like turbo boomer stuff. It's even older than, but it's like turbo. What generation is that? Like the silent generation or something?
Older than boomers? I thought that's the greatest generation.
Or it's one of those generations. But just the fact that there's this in 1987, there's a deep nostalgia for like the 40s, the 50s, which wouldn't have
silent
even,
generation's 28 to 45, excuse me.
Which wouldn't have even translated to like the adult viewers of TNG at the time necessarily.
Right.
It would have been the things that their parents were interested in. And it's so kitschy and old and doesn't make a lot of sense that both Picard and Riker would say, oh yeah, jazz from the 40s, New Orleans specifically. I know all the like different regional variations of jazz. I know subgenres of it. That doesn't track, because what year does TNG take place again? 23 what?
Oh, I always forget. I think it's 2364, but let me confirm. 2364, I was right. So
to put that in context, 2364 is 300 and no, even more. 2364 from 1987. Sorry, 2364 from the 1940s is like 420 years, right? Okay, it's around 2020 right now. So rewind the clock, we're talking about around the year 1600.
Yeah.
Who's
nostalgic for the 1600s?
Can you name for me a single musical thing from the year 1600 or the 1600s?
Well, here's the thing. Like, is Mozart the 1600s?
I believe Mozart may have been active. Nope. Date of birth 1756 to 1791 is Mozart.
Okay, then no.
If I Googled
not
music...
Not even the founding of the... this is pre-United States, dog. Like, yeah.
Music of the 1600s, That's the Baroque period.
Yeah.
Refers to an era that started around 1600 and ended in 1750, and included composers like Bach, Vivaldi, and Handel. So like there are, I'm not saying we've totally lost that time. Obviously there are like continuing artifacts of the 1600s. And I'm not even saying it's unusual for there to be people out there in the world who have an interest in the 1600s as a time period. But for Riker and Picard to both have this like intimate knowledge of those things, it just is kind of funny to me. And it doesn't acknowledge how chronologically that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that there are people out there who are obsessed with the art of the 1600s, but not with the culture. There's nobody who's like, I miss how people used to walk and talk in the 1600s. There's people who are like, I love Bach, and I think like music was better. Yeah, but like that specific obsession with like the outfits and like the jazz bar and all that stuff, like I don't think so. And maybe you can make an argument if you want to get big brained here for a sec. People in 2364 are like, they have more time to think about culture like this because they're quote unquote post scarcity and post war and all that stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
But like, it doesn't track. I honestly think though that Minuet saves this episode for me and takes it into so bad it's good, because the moment when Minuet like admits that she is a program that was told to like distract them and keep them in the holodeck is like very human, despite her being a program in the holodeck, and I thought that was really interesting.
Just to clarify, I think the episode is so good it's good.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't saying the episode was bad. I just like, as someone who used to be a history teacher and majored in history, I like doing the math of the years like that and thinking about what does it mean textually for Riker to be a guy who longs to play trombone in a place from 320 years prior to when he's existing.
Yeah.
Like he just has this fundamental yearning that would be the equivalent of one of us saying like, man, I'd love to play violin in a concert hall in wherever, Vienna or something. I don't even know if that's right. We both go to
Vienna.
I think that's a Mozart thing. Okay. But I liked the episode. I thought the episode was good. Okay. That's my opinion on it.
Well, then what's your rating on it, big man? Because I would put it in high C, low B.
I think it should go in the B category. On my personal tier list, it would be A, but I can see why it should be B.
Okay. Easy enough. B is catching up to C with the most episodes right now. Number 16, Too Short a Season.
Oof, no.
Oh my god. No. This episode sucks, fam. I hate this one. I hate this one.
This one's no good.
The premise for folks is a guy named Jameson comes to the Starch Fleet, and they're like, oh, there's a problem on a planet, and they're only going to talk to us if we bring Jameson. And they find out that Jameson like has this youth serum that he's been taking that he like hid from his wife so he could have it for longer, and it's like making him age down. So the old man makeup is really bad until he just looks like the actor. And the reason that they only want him on there is because the leader of this planet wants revenge on him. It's a fucking boring revenge story.
Yeah.
I think the makeup here is so bad that it's bad. Yeah, this was a stinker to me.
I agree. I think this is F tier. I don't even want to spend a lot of time talking about it, to be honest.
Nope. Easy enough. Iverson's disease. When the bow breaks, this planet, they have been so poisoned that they can't have kids anymore. So we're gonna steal all the Enterprise's kids and try to raise them.
It's the same thing. Oh boy, these guys are acting a little. I don't think they should act that way. How do we feel about the Prime Directive? This is gonna be tough.
It's a D tier.
Yeah, it's not offensively bad. It's just really not interesting.
The thing that saves it to me from being an F tier is I like Wesley working with the kids to like trick the people, But there's a lot of scenes of them being like, come on, Cindy, play the piano. And she's like, I think I want my mom. And they're like, no, Cindy, I'm your mom now. And like, they just do that exact gag like 8 times. And it's really annoying.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm like, oh God, is TNG bad? Like, what's going on again? I thought we were good, but we're actually bad. And then Home Soil comes in and you're like, let's go. Let's talk about,
terraforming.
Let's talk about terraforming. Yeah. Let's talk about androids. Let's talk about
non-organic life forms. Yeah.
Oh, a macro brain, micro brain. Excuse me.
This is like this is an example of an episode that is not about the characters in any way that I can really remember, except that Geordi and Data get to hang out at the beginning. And I think this is the one where we see through Geordi's eyes for a little bit. Is that right? Or
I thought that's
a different one.
That's Heart of Glory.
That's Heart of Glory. But Geordi and Data are hanging for a bit, and there's sort of some stuff with them, and then we kind of abandon that. And there's like really not that much going on in terms of character stuff, but the sci-fi elements are so interesting and surprising that I think this is a really cool episode as a result of that.
Yeah, I think the discussion of terraforming is fascinating in our world and in this universe. I think the scientist who's playing the like downtrodden one, who's like really sad that this life form is being harmed by their work, is fantastic. I think she's great. I think again the like one globe of one light bulb in a glass box representing a civilization that turns into a crystal is so cool, and this is exactly the kind of crunchy sci-fi stuff that I want out of TNG.
Mm-hmm.
I have very few complaints about this episode.
Yeah, and it's an angle on the Prime Directive that I think is actually interesting. I mean, I think that the Prime Directive is interesting, but we sort of hit it from the same direction a few times. And then we get this episode that says, okay, you've got this Prime Directive that says don't interfere with other civilizations, but like, how do you even know when you're looking at a civilization? What if you can't even perceive it? How can you be certain that you're ever not violating the Prime Directive by trying to settle somewhere? Is terraforming in and of itself not a violation of a sort of Prime Directive attitude towards nature? Like, I think that raises some really interesting questions.
Oh, there is a part in this one where Geordi like looks through his visor and talks about stuff because he sees the light in like the inorganic light on the civilization. And there's that amazing line where Data asks Geordi, speculation, could it be alive? And Geordi says, how could it be alive? It's inorganic. And like looks at Data for a second and goes, oops.
Yeah.
It's dealing with questions that this show needs to handle, which is like, what does it mean to be alive now? What is a civilization?
Mm-hmm.
What is human? Like, oh, it's so good. It's so interesting. And it's not even character focused. Like TNG doesn't have to be that. It's capable of a lot more. I love it. Honestly, this might be one of my faves, TBH. Question is, where do we rank it, though?
A or S.
Oh. I feel weird giving it S tier.
Me too. I think it's an A tier episode.
Okay.
I think it's a strong, solid A.
A really good A. I don't think this season's actually going to... it might have S tiers. We'll see where we go. Coming of age. Wesley has his Starfleet exam and meets a cute girl. And then also, the show interrogates itself not even 19 episodes in. Again, they do everything too early in the show. Give me like another season before you're like, hey, so why did you go to the holodeck? And it's like, what? We went once. I'm a big fan of the concept of a higher power comes to us and judges us for our actions in the series. I think that stuff's super cool. They don't do enough with it here, although some of these characters do come back in the neutral zone. But I'm not enamored with it.
I also think it resolves a little strangely, where the guy who is investigating, it turns out he's investigating Picard, and he's trying to figure out like, oh, is Picard a bad captain? And he's interrogating these people and saying, oh, you think Picard's cool? Well, have you seen season 1 of TNG? That dude is making decisions that are strange. He's maybe violating a Prime Directive now. And then he turns around and he says, Picard, can I please be on your ship? You're so cool. You're such a great guy.
Right.
And then his boss is like, man, I just wanted to see if you wanted to be in charge of the school. And like, that is given so... That, I think, is a really interesting question for Picard, where he's really good at mentoring other people. And that's like one of his strengths as a leader, is the way that he's able to advise people or like encourage them to grow and develop. And it's interesting to see him go from, I think one of the genuine ways that he's changing as a character is from episode 1 of the season, where he's like, I don't like kids, to by this episode, he's got a really good rapport and relationship with Wesley and opens up to him and says, hey, you didn't get into Starfleet. I didn't get into it my first time either. And I would have liked an episode that dealt with that more deeply, as opposed to spending so much time with the kind of fake mystery of, oh no, why are we in trouble? Just tell us what's going on. And like, have Picard think about, do I want to be a teacher or do I want to be exploring around the place?
Yeah, interrogate what his goals are.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that this episode makes a big deal out of like, oh no, something bad is happening on the ship today. Because like, from our viewer perspective, something bad happens on the Enterprise every single day. You mentioned earlier how like you wish they could just hang out on the holodeck and have a good time. I think there is a scene in one of these episodes where Wesley like goes to the holodeck and skis, but then he like gets sick and it becomes a whole thing. And in this one, I was like, when they're surprised that something goes wrong, like, and the people that came to inspect them are like, oh no, a guy's stealing one of your ships. It's like, guys, it's business as usual here. Not just because it's the Enterprise, but like, isn't our job to deal with problems? Like, you're not going to come on a day where we have no problems. That's not how this works. It's similar to how like I was legit bummed when later in the season they're like, we're going to go to Atlantica or Aquatic, whatever, the beach planet, and they never get to go because they're not supposed to have fun. But I really want them to just go and hang out really badly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this episode has a lot of good stuff to it, and we joke about it like interrogating the show like too early, but I think they can do that again. And Q also exists to do that, right? Like they're doing the Q thing, but it's Starfleet this time, so their values are different. I see. Sure. Whereas Q is like, your whole society is not perfect. Starfleet is like, your ship is bad. You're managing your ship poorly. I kind of want to give this one a C.
Coming of age?
Yeah.
I think it's better than that. I think it's a B.
You can give it a B? Okay, I'll give it no higher than a B.
Okay.
No higher than that. Oh, God. Do we even need to talk about Heart of Glory? S tier episode.
S tier
episode. S tier episode. Done. Easy. Worf is amazing here.
Yeah.
Oh,
I recorded a little thing about this one, but it turned out to be like 8.5 minutes long of me just gushing about how great Worf is and how happy I am that this is like a direction the show's moving in.
Even the B plot, even like the beginning of the episode when they find some Klingons on a ship that they stayed on because they like won a battle and they were like looking for new people to fight because that's what Klingons do. And they come onto this ship and they're like, Worf, you don't hate the humans who manage you here? And he's like, no, I chose to be here. And they're like, why? And he tells them his backstory about how he was like raised by humans because his like, his town and his family were like killed and destroyed and all this stuff. And he's awesome. And he like engages with the Klingons in a way that feels respectful of everybody involved. And nobody is just like, well, the Klingons are stupid, but Worf is a good one. Like, it doesn't even end like that. It's just like, I acknowledge that what they're saying is very valid. And I'm going to have to keep dealing with this for the rest of my life. Is that I have this fundamental urge in me for like violence and war. But I'm still in Starfleet. I'm not leaving. And I love that. I think it fleshes out Worf's character so much. Michael Dorn kills it here. And again, yeah, seeing through Geordi's eyes thing at the beginning was so cool. When Picard is like, do you see it? What's that weird dude over there? And he's like, that's Riker. What do you mean that dude? He's like, oh, that's what Riker looks like to you? Like he looks like a glowing orb or whatever. So yeah, that's how he always looks. I think it's an episode that encourages you to empathize, and I want that more out of TNG. So
Yeah, and I think what I really loved about it is it, like I said before, it's an episode where Worf is not like choosing to totally leave behind or remove his Klingonness for the sake of being a Starfleet officer. He does the Klingon sort of death ritual with the other guys, and Picard and everybody else is like, oh, I'm so scared. There's the moment where Tasha and the security team are like, I really thought that Klingon was going to kidnap that kid. And he's like, what are you talking about? That wasn't going to happen. And then he's able to give this other Klingon guy a death through battle instead of a more dishonorable death.
Yeah.
And it's just like an episode that puts you into the worldview of the Klingons and asks you to empathize with it, like you were saying. And we sort of walk away from that with Worf taking his position again and being like, I was just joking about joining the Klingons. Come on, let's go.
It's me, Worf. Let's go party.
And I really, really liked it a lot.
Yeah, absolute stunner. Incredible episode. Need more Worf. Can't wait for his makeup to get better. Apparently this is like his final version of how he looks. And I could watch a Worf show, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Arsenal of Freedom. Basically from this point on, the show is good. Is what I have in my notes.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some up and down moments, but from Heart of Glory onwards, you're watching a good show. The Arsenal of Freedom is an anti-capitalist screed that also establishes firmly that TNG exists immediately post a huge war that affected people who are alive today. And I think that's today as in the universe of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this planet that they go to because they see a recorded message, and it turns out it's a recording from like during this war from a long time ago that ended, and the guy's trying to sell weapons to different factions in the war. And so they go there, they investigate it, and it turns out that they're being tested to be the next client for this guy. And so the test is that his drones like get progressively more powerful and adapt to try and kill Tasha Yar, Riker, and Data.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. It has a lot of big things to say about like the military-industrial complex. It gives Riker some time to be a character, and most crucially, my boy, my freaking dude, Geordi LaForge gets to man the Enterprise.
So good.
Oh my god, this is the best B plot in the season, dude. Are you joking?
It's incredible. The guy
Geordi
who like
separates
the guy who tries like stage a coup against Geordi, and Geordi's like, no, get out of here. I'm in charge. It's really good.
And the guy respects him later, Lieutenant Logan. He like comes back later and he's like, okay, I guess I'll do what you have to say. Love that. I love this like implication that, because Geordi's like a young dude, presumably, right? And so everyone's like, you don't know how to lead. But he's been watching every single thing that Picard does. He can lead as good as anyone else. And he splits the top of the Enterprise, like the saucer off, which I love, and I want to see them do more often. And like goes on to rescue everybody who is on the planet, and it's like, and then they fight this invisible enemy because there's also a military test being done against the Enterprise, and oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. He's a younger guy, and also like as much as Star Trek wants to say this is like a post-racial future, there is, whether it's in universe or not, there's I think a very powerful message that's being communicated here about this white guy who's like, you in charge? I don't think so. And Geordi standing his ground and saying, yeah, me in charge. That's actually how this is going to go. And whether that's in the text of the show, there are racial tensions, or that's a metatextual thing about like, yeah, there's a black guy who's in charge of the Enterprise right now. Deal with it. I think that that's really cool and powerful. And also one of my favorite scenes of the whole season is the scene where Deanna Troi says like, oh, Geordi, can I talk to you for a second? And she tells him basically like, he's like, I'm cool, I'm fine, I'm not nervous about this. And she's like, yeah, I know. Other people are nervous. Help them to feel less nervous.
Yeah.
And to watch Geordi do that through that conversation with Deanna Troi, it's so cool. Did you think that Deanna Troi and Geordi LaForge are going to talk and like help each other grow as people? I didn't expect it, and I loved it.
That's where Troy has potential. Is she can slot it to any character's plot and be like, hey, I understand you, and I think you're gonna do fine. And for the Chatz fans and for the cult classic 90s sci-fi fans, the actress who plays Sue, the Asian woman who works with Geordi on the bridge when he takes over, is played by the same Julia Nixon, who goes on to play Catherine Sakai in Babylon 5.
Okay, sure, that's cool.
So she does sci-fi stuff, and also gets jobbed out, unfortunately. But she's actually good here. Like her and the guy who plays Solus are like this is another universe where like Geordi leads these two people and they're good together. I love their confidence and their joy when they succeed at the end, and they're like, "Yeah, we did do that. Yeah, we are the B team, and yet we live. Like this is great."
It's awesome.
Yeah, is this S or A tier? We think.
It's tough because I think that Geordi plot is S tier. I think the stuff on the planet is like kind of interesting. I'll give it S tier just for the Geordi plot's that good. How about that?
Yeah, controversial but true. Symbiosis. This is speaking of fraught metaphors.
Annoying.
They really whiffed the whole drug addict plot here. I'm remembering everything about this one. It's hitting me like a wave of frustration. There is two races on a planet, the Ornarans and the Breccians. And there's two races. One of them has an illness that they don't understand, but they don't know. The other race has the cure to it, and they don't want to give it to them because it's their property, and they want to be paid for it. And we find out that it's a manipulated, like intentional addiction to this drug so that they can make money, because it's the only thing their society knows how to make anymore is this narcotic drug. There was never a plague. It's trying to say something about addiction and like recovery and the way that like there are cycles of addicts like this. But it's once again, we're going to keep beating this drum. It is the Enterprise going, wait, you guys are all stupid. What do you mean you're letting them get addicted? Make your own. Go make something useful. Stop making drugs, you dumbasses. And I think it's very judgmental to like addicts, and also just the way that, and it fundamentally misunderstands like how people become addicted to things. And I think there's like bigger points to be made about like drugs being like put into our society to like get certain types of people addicted to them. But like, this episode is not trying to tackle that. It's just trying to make the Enterprise look cool and make the people on the planet look really dumb. And I don't like it for that.
Yeah, I think the thing that I was really frustrated with and trying to sort through is this is the episode where the show really takes a stand on the Prime Directive being a thing, and Picard essentially lectures Dr. Crusher and says like, hey, every time in history that like a society has meddled with another society, it's been bad or there have been unintended consequences. Therefore, this is just our rule. We just don't get involved. I think what's interesting is the way that Picard uses the Prime Directive as an excuse to violate the Prime Directive. By essentially depriving this trade that's happening of some of the machinery necessary to continue it, which hopefully means that it will grind to a halt. But I don't feel good about the way that Picard talks about the like withdrawal that this society is going to go through as they don't have access to their drug anymore. And he's kind of like, nah, it's got to happen at some point. Well, when we were going to make them feel not as bad and reduce their suffering, why? What's the point? It's like, no, that actually could have been a thing. And also, is it violating the Prime Directive to just tell people what's going on? To just say, hey, just so you know, this is a narcotic. Anyway, bye. I don't know. Like, that's where I feel really iffy about it. And maybe that's productive. Maybe that's the point, is we're supposed to feel really iffy about it. But it feels like the show is saying, look, here's an example of a situation where you would want to violate the Prime Directive, and we're going to tell you it has to not be violated. And I'm not convinced personally.
I don't exactly. Yeah. And it's more to my original point about it, which is the Prime Directive was like written into the show to be broken. and written to be questioned constantly. So like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like you just said, if I just tell somebody something, isn't that breaking it also? I think it ends up being a little bit messy in that way. But I think there's like something here, and I want them to do these ideas in a better episode. Is kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah.
Also, it's just really funny at the beginning when they're like, before they know what's going on, and they talk to one of the Ornarans on the computer, and they're like, "Can you plug the thing in?" He's like, "What do you mean? I've never plugged anything in." And they're like, "You're the captain of a ship and you don't know how to plug it in?" He's like, "Not really. Can you guys come plug it in?" And that's hilarious until you realize it's because he's high on drugs and it's like kind of goofy, but it's funny in isolation there. Like when I first watching this, I was like cracking up laughing, and then I'm like, "Oh no." Also, speaking of doing a lot with a little, the Ornarans and the Breckians are differentiated because the Ornarans wear like sweaters and the Breckians wear like 70s vests. They all look like they're in like a 70s band, and I love that. I think honestly, I think this is a D tier episode. I'm sorry if that's
I agree.
low.
I agree.
No, okay, good. Forgot to mention this. My favorite screen cap of the entire season is in Symbiosis, where the guy, the Ornaran, like has the magic to like he has like Riker's life in his hands, and Jonathan Frakes just makes a really funny face when he's about to be killed. He's like, "Oh!" It's really great. Next up is Skin of Evil. Yeah, so this is the episode where we lose a member of our crew, because there's an evil black sludge monster on a planet that is, and they go in through this so briefly. He's created from a society that shed off all of their evil and tried to become perfect, so they got rid of all their evil and left it on the planet. There's something really lonely about that, right? This is a character a thing who was left behind by his society. But what is actually happening here? Well, they put a bunch of printer ink on top of a dude, and he walked around and said, "I'm evil."
He sounds like me doing an impression of an evil character.
100%.
It's so silly. Do you want me to play your clip about Skin of Evil?
I think this one's brief. Yeah.
I have one too that's also brief.
Okay, great.
Here's yours.
Hey, Chatz folks, this is Alan again. It is 1:05 a.m. on the evening of Thursday, March 17th, 2022, and I'm here to talk about Skin of Evil, the TNG episode that brought us the death of Tasha Yar, the lieutenant and head of security, I believe, for season 1 of TNG. And she was, as I understand it, removed from the show unceremoniously, some might argue, because Denise Crosby didn't want to be on Star Trek anymore, because they never ever wrote her character plots. They never ever gave her anything to do other than say, "Yes, Captain," and let other guys do the storylines, because TNG, for a large chunk of this season, has not known how to write women. So I totally understand why she would be like, "I don't want to do this," because not only is it like you are following up on one of the most iconic, important sci-fi television shows ever made, but you're like part of a crew that's going to be there for presumably like 6-7 years, and you don't know when they're going to figure out their stuff, how they're going to write characters. I totally get it. But to speak to Skin of Evil specifically, I think the episode without that context is fine. It leans towards bad, honestly. Besides the fact that, the skin effect on the guy looks really bad. I looked it up, and it's oh my god, what is it? It's printer ink and like some other material. And I thought that was so funny. You guys can like talk over me or edit it in here if you remember.
Alan, I forget what it is. Sorry, I didn't look it up.
And like the guy like standing up inside of it, like there are parts where that's kind of cool. And also the one sentence explanation of like this society created, got rid of all their evil bad stuff and shed it like a skin, and then that skin got left behind on the planet, is like a little interesting, And I think that's what TNG season 1 is at its worst, is it's a little interesting. I was going back and looking at my notes on previous episodes, and I was like, damn, I liked most of these. But I think the truth is I liked parts of most of them, but I overall didn't love most of them. And that's where I land so far. I have 3 episodes left. Slowinski has mentioned that the last couple are not great, which I get. but I'm going to stay optimistic, and we're going to push forward and finish season 1 of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I think that's a really great way to describe season 1 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is that the episodes are not the best, but there's always something that makes you say, yeah, I want to watch more of this show. Except for Skin of Evil, which sucks, and I don't like it.
You don't like it?
No, it's a bad episode.
Yeah. Well, okay.
We could have had a martial arts competition.
Really good.
The funeral scene's really good. Here's I recorded something about it also, if I could just play it.
Go for it.
Okay, so here's my thoughts on Skin of Evil right after I watched it. This is Magellan recording for TrekChatz 1. I just finished watching Skin of Evil, and this is officially a Tasha Yar fan cast. Not hearing anybody has to say. She was taken before her time. The fact that we did not get to see Tasha Yar participate in the ship's martial arts competition is an affront to everything that is good about television, and I'm upset. Yep, that's all. Just wanted to register my my feelings about that. If you don't like Tasha Yar, I don't know what you could base that opinion on because we didn't see much of her. So not going to engage with that anymore. Tasha Yar is cool. Probably. We didn't get enough. I think I'm eating while I'm doing this. All right.
Sorry.
Anyway, that's all I got. The fucking thing was stupid. The oil guy. Oh my god. Okay, Star Trek. I'm gonna watch the next one now. We'll always have Paris. Probably gonna go to Paris. Let's do this.
Close.
After it was on TV or something.
Sorry. Auto played something else of ours.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Close. Yeah, we almost went to Paris, but not quite.
Yeah, this episode's it makes me sad, right? And I also read that funeral scene was the actors reacting to her not being on the show anymore. Like, it's all real. The tears from like Marina Sirtis were real. Everyone being like super stern there. It's just like them going, wow, this person leaving our show because it sucks so much and we're all staying.
Mm-hmm.
I think the visual there is really beautiful, that they use the holodeck for like a funeral and they have the grassy knoll. And I think it's really touching too that Data says the whole thing about like, I'm not sad about her death. I'm sad about the spot that's going to be missing. And he's like, am I defective, Captain? And Picard's like, no, that's exactly how grief works. Like, you're not sad for that they're gone. You're sad that there's something no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything about that is great. I think Armis, the black goo thing, is, I don't know. It's dumb. It looks so bad, and that's fine. Riker falling into it and then his head popping out of it, also really bad. But, I mean, I was also just bummed. I was like I was really emotional at the end. I'm like, damn, Tasha Yar, what the hell? What can I say? I'm a sap.
Mm-hmm.
They handle it really maturely. Like the scene where Crusher, Dr. Crusher, is like trying to heal her, like in the med bay, and like everyone's like rushing around and stuff. I thought was really great because you know that it's for real this time. It's for keeps.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really good, but otherwise it's not a particularly good episode outside of the production details.
Mm-hmm.
I think it falls in a flat C, to be honest with you, because
I think so too.
It should be a good episode, but it is not.
Yeah, I agree.
Nearly wrapped up here, folks. We'll always have Paris, which is a fascinating episode where it's actually the A plot and the B plot do totally connect to each other. Picard encounters a woman from his past after her husband's experiments unravel the fabric of time. So he's traveling through the past, and that's also how they solve the problem. His Data travels through time, kind of.
Yeah.
Or travels through space. I like that. I like it when the A plot. I know I just said like it makes sense that the A plot and the B plot don't connect, but sometimes when they connect, it feels really cool. And I thought this one was enjoyable. I think the scene where Data like puts the reactor in that machine and fixes everything is so good.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like
and
talking to himself.
Datas and stuff, yeah.
Ugh, and he's like, you got to time it, Geordi. I need to time it so we all hit it at 23 seconds. I love that. I love Picard fencing at the beginning.
Very good, very good.
And yet, I don't particularly care for this whole Picard love plot.
Yeah, I don't think it's like bad. I just don't think it's that interesting because to me, there's something compelling about, it's almost like Picard, he's too comfortable with explaining what the issue was,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he's so past it that it's not that vulnerable for him anymore. It sort of is, but I think he's like made up his mind and made his choice, and
Yes.
so that's what is narratively a little strange about it, is we're not seeing a character making the choice between, okay, do I stay for true love or do I go forth, go boldly go, da 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 da. We just have a guy who made the choice and doesn't really regret it either. He's sort of considering, how do I feel about this? What would life have been like? But there's not really a moment where he can genuinely choose to go back. There's not really a moment where he is, regretting his decision. And his relationship with the woman from his past is just so amicable. you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's just like, hey, what's up? Hey, do you want to go in the holodeck to the cafe that I was supposed to meet you at? And you're like really upset with me? Oh, cool. That was cool. All right. See ya.
You know what it is? This is the show's last attempt at saying that these characters can't have interpersonal drama.
Mm-hmm.
And it's bumping really hard against like, okay, well, we can't make Picard bad, but we can't make his love plot, like past plotline, interesting unless he's flawed. And it doesn't come to a conclusion, doesn't resolve in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Picard stuff, like, it would be great if they just let him make mistakes and be flawed, but they don't. And so he has to be like, yeah, I guess it's okay that you left. I that I left. I guess I made a good decision. Okay. Like, no, that's not actually that interesting, guys. I want him to feel bad.
Right. And also, like, there's this whole thing where the guy that she's with now says, oh man, she really hated her life. And then at the end, he's like, baby, you want to go back to living the life you hate? It's going to be totally different. And she's like, I love you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. Bye, everybody.
Really weird.
It's just, a little strange. I think it's a B. I think it's an entertaining episode. I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm. The data stuff at the end is also what salvages it for me.
Mm.
Two more here. We have Conspiracy, which is another mess of a production. This episode was almost one of the coolest freaking episodes of the show. Before we talk about that, though, can you play my audio diary about this one?
Yes.
Captain's log. Shit! I could have said Captain's log before all of these. Editor, please.
Sorry,
edit me.
I gotta pause it there for a second. How did we not? How did we not?
We screwed.
No.
It's season 1 of TNG. They didn't know what they were doing. We don't know what we're doing. It's totally in line. We could have called these Captain's log. From now on, these are Captain's logs. This is the first Captain's log.
It just was so. We were like, yeah, we should record little like thoughts along the way and put them in the episode.
Every single episode opens with a Captain's log, and yet we're like, yeah, that's a funny idea. Wait. And it took me the whole season to find. It took us both the whole season for it to click.
Ugh, okay, I'm gonna keep playing this.
And saying Captain's log before all of these little recordings I'm doing, because it'll sound really cool on the episode.
No, it won't.
Anyways,
I'm not doing that.
I want to talk about Conspiracy really briefly. This is the second to last episode of season 1. It is 124 to be exact. A controversial episode. It's one that Nick asked me. Nick, of the Brothers of Infinite War, for folks listening, friend of the podcast, was like, hey, can you either like stream this one or like live post it or post a video about it? And I figured I would do a bunch of the above because I was kind of running tight on time here. So I posted about it live in Discord, which you can check out on our Chatz Discord, found by being a patron at patreon.com/ChatZpod. And
yay!
So Conspiracy is the second to last episode. It is a really weird one because it starts out as like a fascinating like critique of Starfleet almost. And it's like, oh, they're so corruptible. It's amazing how they like can be infiltrated so easily. Maybe they're not perfect. And it's like, this is great. This is so interesting. Finally muck up this like perfect beacon of leadership that's like guiding the Enterprise. And then it's a bug plot episode. And I think it's almost exactly like Skin of Evil, where they had a great like thing going, and the mandates of the show ruined it. Whereas Skin of Evil is like a bad TNG villain that leads to a great emotional payoff. Conspiracy is a great TNG villain, ruined by a like disappointing payoff. If that makes sense.
Agreed.
And
It does.
from what I've read, this is yet
Agreed.
another
That's
case
you.
of season 1 of TNG kind of doubling back on itself and being adjusted in the last minute, and you can really tell that they wanted this to be a Starfleet is corrupt. There is something going on within Starfleet. Like, the first 20 minutes of this episode are incredible. They're so well directed. It's so scary. My heart's racing watching the whole thing.
Mhm.
And then it just becomes a bug episode, which if you've been listening to Chatz for a long time, you know that we have a love-hate relationship with bug episodes on sci-fi shows. So it's like, oh, come on, you guys had it. You had the best plot ever. And apparently, I've done a lot of reading about this one, right? Because it's so wild. First of all, this was originally going to be how they set up the Borg. Was like, there are people infiltrating Starfleet. They look like us. They talk like us. And then, oh my god, it's the Borg. Like, you know, cool twist thing. They set up the Borg later. This plot was also reincorporated into DS9, apparently, which makes a lot of sense because I know from the very, very, very little I know about Deep Space Nine that they do actually dig into some, like, cool conspiracy stuff that doesn't get the cop-out bug infestation answer. Also, this one pivots from a conspiracy episode to a Cronenberg thing with, like, the directing and then, of course, the infamous chest burster scene at the end, which was, like, completely cut out of a lot of airings of the show. And for good reason, it's very violent. It's not that, like, sound-wise that gross, but, like, that dude's stomach did blow up. And so did his head and his, like, spinal cord, and it's really yucky. I love this quote here from the wiki, and this has a citation needed on it, so I want to say that, just for the record. The original version of the script did not feature alien parasites. The conspiracy in question was similarly a military coup within Starfleet. Gene Roddenberry vehemently opposed such an idea, since he believed Starfleet would never stoop to such methods. There was just no way Torme, who wrote the original script for this episode, could get away with suggesting that the Federation was anything less than a perfect government. Thus, the alien angle was introduced at his insistence. So, Tracy Torme, the original writer for this, the premise of this episode was like, we can do something that's like a commentary on the Iran-Contra affair, which was ongoing.
That would have been way more interesting.
We can do like a conspiracy thing, and we can like set up the board, like we have all this stuff. And then Roddenberry was like, you can't fuck with Starfleet. And we're going to talk about it a lot in this podcast. I'm sure we have already. And Gene Roddenberry is like the most damning thing about Star Trek sometimes. And it's so fascinating because he also made it. So it's like, Gene. But overall, conspiracy, really interesting episode. Even though it's a disappointing ending. I love Riker pretending to be possessed. That's brilliant.
Same.
And you can see Jonathan Frakes like stealing the show when he does that. Otherwise, okay episode. Onward to the finale.
Yeah, well said.
That's you.
Really well said there. Good stuff. I like the points you made.
God. I totally agree with what you said there. I think this, I mean, J. Michael Straczynski had the guts to do it for real in Babylon 5
right.
and make it like a major long-term plot. And this episode is like, what if there was a conspiracy? It's actually bugs.
Oh, you're fine.
That was
you're
close.
Fine.
That was close. And this would have been way more interesting as a commentary on the Iran-Contra affair. Way more interesting as this conspiracy of people who are like, let's not follow the Prime Directive. Let's do other stuff. Let's do this. I would have much rather had seen the original draft of this because
Same.
what it becomes is like, I don't know, it's a freaking scroll story or something. And like, those aren't interesting to say like, oh, this person's bad too. Okay, cool.
But like, yeah, so I mentioned this in there, but we had listeners be like, hey, can you like live post through this? And if you're in our patron only Discord, then you'd see me live posting through watching Conspiracy, where I was like, is this the episode that I wanted, where they're finally like Star Sweet is Evil, and we're in season 1? Did they finally make the best episode ever? And as soon as I knew it was bugs, I was like, I'm checked out. The rest of this doesn't matter to me. The Cronenberg stuff, like the effects are pretty good, but like unnecessary. And you can totally tell that someone was like, no, stop writing that, and just jumped in. And I find that fascinating. I think so often, that's my big thing here with TNG season 1 is like good ideas, unfortunately hampered by a like really rigorous writer's room, and like a really like commanding writer's room.
Yeah, and this like devotion to a utopianism that doesn't really make sense or serve a narrative purpose, and actively undermines useful or interesting narratives. Because then what are you able to say with the Federation or Starfleet exactly? I guess you can say, hey, it'd be really nice if people like weren't hungry and didn't need anything and were nice. Yeah, that would be nice. What gets in the way of that? How do we get there? It's not helpful to me to see a society that's like figured it out without having some moments where you make sure that you keep that up and like root out the things that could undermine that. And I don't know, this was an opportunity to do that just was squandered with neck bugs.
I agree. And I really wish that it worked out. I mean, I was blessed to go into this episode not knowing that it was a bug one. There was genuinely a part of me that was like, okay, there's a conspiracy. I didn't think like they're gonna shut down Starfleet, but like watching the beginning of this episode, when Picard is contacted by his friend Walter Keel, and he's like, you can't talk about this. It needs to be on an encoded like channel. Come visit me on this like weird lava planet. Here's me and a bunch of other Starfleet people. They're lying to you. I was like, this is so good. This is so scary, and I feel for Picard being like, how do I tell the crew this? How do we tell Pacifica that we're not going to be there? That's the name of the vacation planet, Pacifica. I'm like, this is so interesting. And instantly they wipe that out with the bug stuff. And instantly it becomes like, let's watch the alien people eat bugs, because we got the effects for that, I guess. I'm so curious what they were eating, actually. But it's like, come eat with us. And then they're all just eating bugs out of bowls. And again, Riker like having the thing on his neck and pretending to be possessed is really fun. But then this is also where they bring back Remick from the other episode, like the interrogation episode. And this time he has a parasite in him and he blows up and it like melts because they set their phasers to kill. Also, the action in this episode's really bad. There's a part where one of the old guys is like, I'm super strong now. And he like beats up Worf or whatever. And you're like, this sucks. This fully sucks.
Looks silly.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess the question then is, what do we rate this?
This is hard. I would say,
I think it's closer to a D than it is a C. I think it's a middling D.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's good stuff in there, but it's not good.
Which
is how I define a D. And finally, we've reached the end. It is the neutral zone, the season finale of season 1 of TNG. Did you expect them to build a larger series plot in the literal final episode of the season about the Romulans coming back? Did you expect them to? Okay, here's my other thing: the B plot about the people, like the Earthlings. This should be the pilot. This should be the first thing you tell me. Is like, look how different the world is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Is like, I don't understand why this is the season finale, and the way the episode is paced is so strange. Because we set up all this conflict with these humans who are from the 21st century, I guess. And then just suddenly at the end of the episode, it's like, okay, well, we're going to drop you off pretty soon. And that's it. That's the end of the episode. Huh?
What? Hold on.
What? okay, and we talk to the Romulans, and the Romulans are like, we're mad at you, and we're back, and we're gonna be scary. Uh-huh. And we didn't learn like what was bugging. So what? I was honestly, when the episode ended, I said, that's it? where was this story in this episode? It was so strange.
Yeah, the A and the B plot don't need to be in the same episode. Also, like if you want to do a Romulan episode, do that, and if you want to do a like an Earthlings coming back, do that. But the way that they intersect is the old rich guy watches them talk to the Romulans and goes, "I disagree with what you're doing," and they're like, "Shut up, dude! Like we're doing politics," and that's the only time that the two plots really smush into each other.
Right.
I like the performances of the Earthlings. I think it's really useful to be like, hey, here's how things are different. I think it's very funny that the rich guy is like, now my bank has to be around still, right? And like, you guys gotta go let me check on my stock portfolio because it's the 80s and I care a lot about stocks in Wall Street. And they're like, what street? Wall Street? There's no Wall Street. I honestly think the B plot by itself is good. I think like Deanna Troi talking to the woman and like showing her family tree and all that stuff is like really like affecting. And trying to accept like, yeah, everybody you know is dead and their like children's children are dead. And the moment where she sees her like great grandson and she's like, that's my husband, and they're like, it's not, but he just like generations work out like that sometimes. It's all really good. I agree though, I don't think the Romulan plot is like that cool, other than to just set up like the Romulans are back and they're not done, like they're ready to fight again.
Yeah, maybe if I saw TOS, I would be like, whoa, the Romulans? All right, let's go. But that doesn't really mean anything to me.
Deeply embarrassed by the way that the Romulans, I didn't realize from the little bits of like TOS I've watched and stuff, are related to the Vulcans. Like they evolved in parallel, but now I know. It's in my head now, guys. I think this episode's actually like a B or a C.
Yeah.
Maybe land.
I think it's a C. Well, yeah. I just don't think it's like all that interesting. Yeah. I think C.
Nearly more than half of the episode is boring. It's just like the stuff that is good is really good.
It's
the southern guy who's like the southern guy who wants to hang out with Data. Love him.
Great. He's great. Yeah.
And he like gets a guitar and they're like, stop playing your guitar. We're trying to figure out how to get back to the past. I thought that was funny. I want to learn more about the neutral zone, the demilitarized zone. This part of space that you're not allowed to ever go to. And if you go into it, it starts a war. That's really cool. But yeah. So it's not a limp ending to the season, but it's not the best ending to the season ever. It's okay, which is how I would describe most of season 1 of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So we will make the image of this tier list available for folks who want to see it. I'm not going to go down the entire thing, but I will say just shout outs to our 2 S tiers, Heart of Glory and Arsenal of Freedom. I can't wait until there are more episodes that match that level of quality, to be honest with you.
Same.
So let's talk then about a couple things real briefly before we call it here. First off, our method. We chose not to watch these things 1 episode a week, 2 episodes a week. Are you satisfied with that? Are you happy with that?
Yes. I think, especially after having this conversation where we kind of dug into specific episodes, I think my enjoyment of a lot of these episodes was predicated on the fact that I wasn't like dissecting them as I was watching them. I was just sort of enjoying the experience of being in the world of Star Trek. And I think there are a handful of these episodes that don't really hold up super well under scrutiny. All of them, I think, have redeeming qualities and cool things and are like vibey, but are not necessarily the most coherent or don't necessarily align with maybe our particular views of the world. I don't know. So I'm glad that we're talking about the season holistically, and I am also feeling like, I got to wait 3 months before we talk about season 2. But I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think there will be a part of us that's glad to have the time.
Yeah.
I think we're committing to 3 months. If we find ourselves like way ahead of schedule, we can talk about that. But I think 3 months is going to be reasonable, because it's another 26 eps. So like, you gotta give yourself time to not watch on the weekends. Give yourself time if you need to go like on a couple of days on a break. I think it works, the way we have it. But it's a live format. Like, for example, I want to change the way I take notes in the future. I want to change how I record those audio things, because I wasn't really recording them with the intent of like talking over them at first, but you can tell by the last one that I was like kind of playing with the format already. So I think I know how to do those now. So again, like TNG, where it's learning how to be a show, this is us learning how to do TrekChatz, is doing it. And then last thing, things you're looking forward to in season 2, things that you know are coming, etc.
I just want to see more. Well, I mean, Riker Beard.
Riker Beard, yep.
Can't wait.
Committed to that now. We're gonna get more Riker Beard than we get without, which is hilarious.
I want to see more Worf, more Geordi. I'm bummed that Crusher's going to be gone for a bit, but I'm excited to watch more TNG and for it to be good, better.
Every time I skim through the episodes in season 2, it already seems better. I know people are like, no, season 2 is not that good, but I'm just saying, Riker's got a fun beard. Also, they introduced Whoopi Goldberg's character in season 2, who we saw in our coverage of a season 3 episode. So you can look forward to that, maybe. Yeah, I think it's gonna be a fun one. Honestly, I'm overall enjoying watching the show as a like meditative evening exercise. So whether or not it's good is not too relevant to me. But in terms of like having fun watching it, yeah, I wanna dig into some new stuff soon. So
yeah.
But that's what I have. That's what we have. Do you wanna go to the zone of plugs? It's instead of the neutral zone, it's the plug zone.
Let's do it.
All right, folks, if you had questions or comments about Star Trek The Next Generation for us, or Star Trek in general, our email address is chatspod@gmail.com. All instances of Chatspod are CHATZPOD. That's why it's called TrekChatz with a Z, if you think about it. We also are on Twitter @Chatspod, where we post updates about our main feed show as well as TrekChatz. We have a really great community-run subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/chatspod. If you're getting into Chatz, the main feed, and you want to hear us talk about other shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Freaks and Geeks, etc., etc., loyal fans of the show have done threads on every week's episode, and we're going through it slowly but surely over there. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, your Trek fans. Every Trek in your life deserves to listen to TrekChatz, the first-time Trek watch here in 2022. And please consider rating us on your podcast platform of choice, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, what have you. If you like the work that we're doing on TrekChatz and want to hear more of us, besides our main feed, which can be found by searching Chatz Television Podcast, we also have a Patreon where you can support us financially, and you also get access to a long backlog of extra content, not always even related to Trek or TNG or TV even. And that's patreon.com/chatspod. Where you can back us at $1, $3, or $5 a month and get different tiers of content, listening to us talk about a variety of things. And if you back us at $5 or more, you get a thank you at the end of every main feed episode of Chatz or TrekChatz. And as of today, our $5 patrons and above include Arthur, Jen, Magellan's mom, Marcus, Nick and Pat of the Brothers at Infinite War, Fendon, Six, and Stefan. Thank you all very much for supporting Chatz and TrekChatz and the whole Chatz multiverse. We appreciate yourself very much. All things Chatz can be found at chatspod.com. That's the website landing page for our main feed, as well as we're going to be putting TrekChatz stuff on there. If you'd like to listen to me more, you can hear me on the Hunter's Quorum podcast, where my friend Six and I, Six, patron and friend of the show, talk about Monster Hunter monsters from the video game franchise Monster Hunter. And we have on a variety of guests. We've talked about all of the Pokemon, and we've ranked them based on whether they're worth keeping or deleting. And so you can find the Hunter's Quorum wherever you listen to podcasts. Magellan, do you have a podcast you'd like to share with folks?
Yeah, I'm on another podcast called Super Smash Echoes, which I do with my friend Justin, where we play. It's sort of a video game book club type setup where on a monthly basis we're playing a game or a part of a game that is the source of a character in Super Smash Brothers, or a game that is inspired by those characters or games. So it's sort of looking at how these kind of big classic video games have echoed in our lives, even if we haven't played them before, and then we play them and see if they live up to them, or we look at games which are echoes of those things. So Super Smash Echoes, it's kind of examining that from multiple angles.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And also Magellan's talking about the X-Files solo style over on our Patreon. On the Chatz file. So you're doing the damn thing. We'll be back in 3 months from now, so that'll be June of 2022 to talk about TNG Season 2. But before we go, we like to end every main feed episode of Chatz, regardless of what show we're doing, with a segment called Chatsums. Chatsums, like the Vlasic Snackum Tiny Pickles. We recommend a tiny little morsel for you to enjoy for 3 months. So I can go first. It's not going to last you 3 months, but I do want to recommend, if you're listening to this around the time that it comes out, 2022's The Batman is still in theaters, starring Robert Pattinson, and I would recommend it because it's worth your time. It is a little bit campier than I expected. It's got some beautiful cinematography. Batman has never been so emo and hot and sad as he is in that movie. Selena Kyle is beautiful and incredible and just amazing. And the Riddler is the villain, and I think that's really cool. If you ever have cared about Batman and you thought, oh, those Christopher Nolan movies, well, they were a little bit too serious. This one's also a little bit too serious, but for different reasons. So if you're on the fence, I recommend checking out The Batman. I think it deserves your time. Magellan, what's your chatsum for the folks?
My chatsum is a book that I finished today. It's a book that my roommate of the pod, Charlie, gave me for Christmas a couple months ago. It's called Sidewalks by Valeria Luiselli. And it's, or Luisei, actually, it might be how that's pronounced. And it's a book of, the best way to describe it is interconnected micro essays that over the course of the book reveal themselves to be all components of one single book long essay, if that makes sense.
Ooh, okay.
So it's a series of meditations on death and travel and space and memory and nostalgia and writing and the absence of things, and just it goes a lot of different places, but it all ends up coming back and converging and fitting together, and it's just brilliant. So if you're looking for that sort of experience, a nonfiction book that has these kind of like bite-sized pieces that reward you paying attention to them and seeing how they come back and build on each other, I would highly, highly recommend Sidewalks. I had a great time, and it's a short read. It's only a little over 100 pages long, so you can read it in a couple sittings, I think. But yeah, big recommend for me for Sidewalks.
I like the words you're saying. Sidewalk. Okay, excellent. Magellan, thank you for being the Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. To my non-bearded Commander Riker. And thank you also very much for listening to TrekChatz. Live long and prosper.
Engage.
Engage.
I like how sometimes he says engage like he's a little bored.
Yeah. Engage.
Engage.
And sometimes he's super into it. He's like, engage. And you're like, yeah.
Sometimes they do like a little skit at the end of the episodes also. And then he's like, engage.
Anyways.
Oh, I really like the episode where he goes, step on it. And then they're like, huh? And he's like, engage, guys.
Engage.
Come on.
You know. I love that he it's always like they say like, okay, next up they always say where they're going next. They're like, plot a course for the Alpha Quadrant system, and they never go there. And I'm like, can we just go